Chapter 8:14. Boom! The flaming bird's huge body turned and whizzed up. 100-meter-long flaming wings slashed toward Gray like a flaming blade, while the black ball in front of Gray quickly met it. Rumble! The flaming bird's huge body staggered, and the slashing wing was blocked by the black ball that had become even more terrifying. A shock wave erupted from the collision between the two, and under the shock wave, the surrounding area was filled with spatial cracks. Curse Rule, a third natural order ability, and also a natural order weapon. After stabilizing the flaming bird's body, the Sun Temple St. Ryan's pupils suddenly shrank, and he looked at Gray with dread. Before reaching the natural order level, having two natural order abilities was already shocking enough. He did not expect the other party to have a third natural order ability and a natural order weapon that the Sun Temple once had. What made him even more fearful was that with this third natural order ability and natural order weapon, the other party's battle power was comparable to his. A third natural order, a natural order weapon, on the city wall of the Sun Holy City. The dozen or so Sun Temple leaders who were watching the battle closely were no longer as relaxed as before. Their expressions changed slightly, and unconsciously, worry rose in their hearts. They knew that the Sun Temple St. Ryan was a veteran natural order contender who had mastered two natural orders, so they were not worried when they saw Gray displaying the power of a natural order with two natural orders. However, now the other party had displayed three natural order abilities, and the number of natural order abilities was more than St. Ryan's. In addition to the natural order weapon, the other party was enough to pose a threat to St. Ryan. The Sun Temple St. Ryan was shocked by Gray's battle power, but Gray was not. Whoosh! With a teleport, Gray appeared behind the Sun Temple St. Ryan. The black ball that had turned back cut through space and attacked the Sun Temple St. Ryan's back. Bang! A strong shock wave spread, and dense spatial cracks appeared in the surrounding area with the shock wave as a large amount of air was sucked into the void zone. At the critical moment, the flaming bird raised a wing and blocked the black ball. However, it wasn't completely unscathed. Not only did it suffer a violent impact, but its huge body was also sent flying backward. The places where it was hit by the small pitch-black ball were also damaged. The flaming bird rolled a few times before stabilizing itself in the air. On its back, St. Ryan of the Sun Temple was in a sorry state. However, he was a rule-level powerhouse after all. Standing on the back of the flaming bird, his body seemed to have taken root. He did not fall off the flaming bird. Whoosh! Gray teleported again and appeared not far from St. Ryan of the Sun Temple. The black ball came crashing down with terrifying power. Bang! The giant flaming bird raised one of its giant claws, and with a violent impact and dense spatial cracks in the surrounding area, it blocked the small black ball. St. Ryan of the Sacred Sun Temple, who was standing on the giant flaming bird, had a gloomy look on his face. Gray's strength had exceeded his expectations. He was both shocked and humiliated. As a veteran law-level expert, he could not even take down a brat who had yet to form laws. If news of this spread, it would be very difficult for the Holy Sun Temple to raise its head among saint-level organizations. Humph! With a cold snort, a resplendent golden light burst out of his body. Then, his body melted like liquid and merged with the flaming bird. As he merged with the flaming bird, it became even larger. The feathers, eyes, and claws on its body became even more real, as if it had flesh and blood. Whoosh! The giant flaming bird looked at Gray, and in its eyes there were real flames burning. In the next moment it pounced towards Gray, its speed once again increasing by a notch. It looked like a real giant claw. One could even see the keratinized skin on the surface. It enveloped Gray. Rumble! The small black ball met it. Where the two collided, a large number of spatial cracks appeared again. This time, it was even more intense than before. This time, the small pitch-black ball was unable to block the giant claw. After the giant claw paused for a moment, it continued to claw at Gray with spatial cracks, as if it wanted to tear apart the heavens. Whoosh! Although the small black ball could not stop the giant claw, it still made the giant claw pause. Taking advantage of this gap, Gray teleported away. Its combat power is even stronger than a first saint. A few miles away, Gray's figure appeared. After Saint Ryan of the Holy Sun Temple merged with the giant flaming bird, his combat power had increased by another level. He had already surpassed First Saint, which was the former saint of the Sacred Eye clan, Wei Wei. Whoosh! With the advantage, the flaming bird chased after Gray and pounced at him again. Its giant claw tore through the space and grabbed at Gray. Under the giant claw, Gray was as small as an ant. Humph! Gray snorted. His combat power was not as good as his opponent's, but combat power was not the only thing that mattered in battle. He used the spatial maze ability. Spatial fluctuations spread out with him as the center and quickly enveloped the flaming bird. Whoosh! The flaming bird, or more accurately, the Holy Sun Temple Saint Ryan, who had turned into a flaming bird, instinctively felt danger. Its huge body twisted and retreated with a gust of wind. It exploded with terrifying speed and barely avoided the spatial fluctuations and appeared a few miles away. It's not just combat power. Its speed is better too. In the spatial maze, Gray was slightly disappointed. Compared to Saint Wei Wei of the Sacred Eye race, Saint Ryan of the Holy Sun Temple was not only stronger, but also faster. In close range, it was not slower than his teleportation. It was with this speed that the other party could escape the spatial maze. Screech! A few miles away, the flaming bird let out a deafening screech. Sensing the abnormality around Gray, the flaming bird that Saint Ryan of the Holy Sun Temple had turned into did not charge at Gray again. Instead, it opened its mouth and a blazing sun appeared. The space was distorted and cracks appeared. The blazing sun crashed into Gray from a few miles away and crashed into the spatial maze. However, just as it crashed into the spatial maze, the blazing sun suddenly disappeared. When it reappeared, it had changed direction and crashed into the flaming bird that Saint Ryan of the Holy Sun Temple had turned into. Such a reversal stunned the flaming bird that Saint Ryan of the Holy Sun Temple had turned into. It then reacted and rolled to dodge, brushing past the blazing sun. The blazing sun exploded more than a dozen miles away and destroyed a large part of the forest. Whoosh! At this moment, Gray appeared not far away from the flaming bird in an instant. As soon as he appeared, he extended the spatial maze toward the flaming bird. After narrowly avoiding the blazing sun, the flaming bird that Saint Ryan of the Holy Sun Temple had turned into rolled, and its agility was affected. This time, it could not avoid the spatial maze and was enveloped in it. Bang! After being enveloped in the spatial maze, the flaming bird that Saint Ryan of the Holy Sun Temple had clearly sensed that something was wrong. With a burst of speed, it hurriedly pulled away from Gray. Unfortunately, it had only retreated a few hundred meters when it suddenly returned to the same place as before. Just as it appeared, the pitch-black ball abruptly teleported over and fiercely collided with its body. Immediately, the collision caused its gigantic body to tumble, and a huge wound appeared where it was hit. Bang! 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 From time to time, the pitch-black balls would appear from all directions and attack the Sun Temple Saint Ryan's flame bird. They appeared too strangely, sometimes to the left and sometimes to the right, and the distance was extremely close. Even with the Sun Temple Saint Ryan's speed, he couldn't dodge in time, and wound after wound appeared on his body. Fortunately, the flaming bird that Saint Ryan of the Holy Sun Temple had transformed into was not weak and its body was extremely large. Otherwise, the flaming bird that Saint Ryan of the Holy Sun Temple had transformed into would have already collapsed. Even so, the flaming bird that Saint Ryan of the Holy Sun Temple had transformed into was riddled with wounds. If this continued, it would definitely collapse. Saint Ryan of the Holy Sun Temple's anxious voice finally sounded from the flaming bird. Stop, I think we can talk. Oh, didn't you just say that I don't have the qualifications? Now you want to talk to me? Looking at the wounded Saint Ryan of the Holy Sun Temple, who had transformed into a flaming bird, Gray's voice was filled with mockery. Previously, the other side had felt that he did not have the qualifications to talk terms with the Holy Sun Temple, but now the other side had taken the initiative to talk. Fighting was indeed the best way to resolve problems. Of course, the prerequisite was that he could win, and it would be best if he could gain the upper hand. Sir, your strength. I already acknowledge it, Saint Ryan of the Holy Sun Temple said in a slightly sullen voice. Then tell me, will the Holy Sun Temple accept my request? Gray chuckled and asked in a noncommittal manner. I can agree to your request, but I have a condition. Before Saint Ryan of the Holy Sun Temple could finish, he was interrupted by Gray. Gray said coldly, You don't have the qualifications to talk terms with me. Agree or not. You only have these two choices. The Holy Sun Temple agrees. Within the flaming bird, Saint Ryan of the Holy Sun Temple said in a sullen voice while gritting his teeth. I hope the Holy Sun Temple can keep its promise. Otherwise, I won't be so easy to talk to next time. Gray snorted coldly and dispelled the spatial maze. He shot a warning glance at Saint Ryan of the Holy Sun Temple, who had transformed into a flaming bird before disappearing with teleportation. If he did not kill the other side, the Holy Sun Temple would very likely be destroyed, and he would be changing history and severely affecting the main world. He did not mind slowly grinding the other side to death in the spatial maze. Chapter 8:15. A human who has yet to achieve rule power can fight a Sun Holy Temple saint and force the Sun Holy Temple to compromise? The conflict between Gray and the Sun Holy Temple had come to an end, but the impact of this incident was getting worse and worse. Even though the Sun Holy Temple tried their best to block the news, they could not stop the news from spreading. The news quickly reached the ears of the nearby saint. After hearing the news, all the saints were shocked and moved. A human who had yet to achieve rule power was able to suppress a saint, and the one who was suppressed was a veteran saint. While they were shocked, the saints did not forget to ridicule the Sun Holy Temple. Some of the saints who had bad relations with the Sun Holy Temple often used this as a reason to ridicule the Sun Holy Temple. However, what had happened to the sacred Sun Hall had given them a warning. Now that there was someone who wasn't a saint but was no weaker than a veteran saint in the vicinity, the various saint organizations all warned their disciples and subordinate organizations to keep a low profile and not provoke this person. If this person was a veteran saint, it would be fine. Such an existence had lived for a long time. Their only goal was to reach a higher level. They rarely appeared in the outside world. However, this person was different. He was not at rule power, and he was not old. He could not have gone deep into the mountains and forests to isolate himself from the outside world. It was very likely that his faction had encountered this person. Although they were not afraid, they would only know if they could win after they fought. It was best if they did not become enemies. In a hotel in a city with a population of more than 1 million, Gray, who had caused this storm, was staying with the little boy Alan and Ing 8. Apart from Ing Ba, the rest of the people he brought to this space-time were all sent out by him to gather information. Now, his top priority was to achieve rule power. However, if he wanted to learn rule power step by step, even with his super memory power, it would take him at least a few decades. A few decades was unbelievably short for an ordinary Annihilation-class giant, but it was still very long for him. After all, he had only spent a few decades growing up. If he wanted to shorten the time, he had to use some very precious magic medicine. That was why he had everyone spread out to gather information about magic medicine. Unknowingly, several months had passed, and the people sent out still hadn't found any news. Mana herbs that could aid in comprehending laws were simply too precious. A single stalk was enough to create a Loranked powerhouse. Even in the origin world, which was rich in mana herbs, the chances of producing such an item were extremely low. If not for this, there would not be so few rule-level powerhouses. Moreover, even if this kind of magic herb appeared, it would be tightly sealed by the forces that knew about it. It would be very difficult for the news to spread. One day, Gray was dining in a restaurant with Alan and Ingba. Ingba's almost impeccable beauty quickly attracted the attention of the diners in the restaurant. This body, this face, if only I could, what? That brat really has good luck with women. If it were me, regardless of day or night, I would definitely make her unable to get out of bed. Many people looked at Ingba with burning eyes. There were 7 people at one table, all of them wearing high-quality clothes. They should be from a powerful family. The 7 of them were saying some nasty things. Their eyes were looking at Ingba without restraint. Their focus was on her breasts, which were enough to make any man fall for her, and her long, white legs. Feeling the unscrupulous eyes of the 7 people, Ingba frowned. She turned around and glared at them. This made the 7 people laugh. Their eyes and words were even more unscrupulous. Ingba looked at Gray. Gray nodded. Ingba was about to stand up and teach him a lesson. Although she couldn't be compared to Gray, she was still a holy lady of Light Temple. Not only had she reached annihilation class, but she was also not far from being a big shot. She was more than enough to deal with 7 people. Ding dong. At this moment, with the sound of the bell, the restaurant door was pushed open. 2 people walked in. One was middle-aged, and the other was young. They looked similar. They should be father and son. The robes that the 2 of them were wearing were not eye-catching, but they were definitely not cheap. The price was even higher than the clothes that the 7 of them wore. On the sleeves, there was an evergreen grass that was completely embroidered with golden silk. This should be the emblem of some family. Seeing the family emblem on the 2 people's sleeves, the faces of the 7 people, who had been unscrupulous before, changed. They looked shocked. The House of Arrays. Why are people from the House of Arrays here? The House of Arrays was the strongest top-class family in the area. It had an annihilation-class big shot. It was the king of the area. In the area, all the factions relied on the House of Arrays to survive. Even the top-class families were no exception. Their family was one of them. It is the leader of the Arrays family. Among the 7 people, a man with some knowledge recognized that the middle-aged man was the leader of the House of Arrays. He smiled. He was going to ask everyone to stand up and greet them. At this time, the father and son of the House of Arrays did not even look at the 7 people. They quickly walked in a direction. That direction was where Gray and the others were. When they were a few feet away from Gray, the father and son stopped. Then, in front of the 7 people's shocked eyes, they bowed to Gray with the most ancient aristocratic etiquette. "Greetings, mister. You know me?" Gray looked at the 2 of them with interest. "I dare not hide it. We have heard of your deeds, mister." The leader of the House of Arrays answered respectfully. His attitude was so polite that the 7 people could not believe their eyes and ears. "Why are you looking for me?" Gray did not say anything and asked. "I want to discuss something with you, mister." The leader of the House of Arrays looked around. Obviously, the matter was not simple. This was not the place to talk. "Follow me." Gray nodded slightly and led the 2 to the living room of his hotel room, then said, "This room is soundproof. If you have anything to say, just say it." The middle-aged man and the young man hesitated. They looked at each other. Then, the middle-aged man spoke. "I wonder if you have heard of the law fruit?" The law fruit. Gray's eyes suddenly lit up as he looked at the 2 in surprise. "You have news of the law fruit?" When he was in the Temple of Time and Space, he had read through the books there. He had specifically looked for information on medicinal herbs that could accelerate the comprehension of laws. One of the medicinal herbs recorded was the law fruit. "Yes, mister. My House of Arrays found a law fruit tree. There are 2 law fruits on it. They will ripen in at most a few months, but there is a law blood beast guarding them. With the strength of the House of Arrays, We do not have the ability to kill this law blood beast and obtain the 2 law fruits. Therefore, we wish to cooperate with you. We will provide information, and you will kill the law blood beast. We will divide the 2 law fruits equally. The leader of the House of Arrays nodded. Chapter 8:16. That's a good suggestion. I am indeed very interested. However, I have a question. Why did you come to me instead of the St. Class organization that your Arather family belongs to? Gray looked at the middle-aged man with a little doubt. Sir, to be honest, the House of Arrays does not have a good relationship with the House of Arrays. Patriarch Arrays showed a wry smile. And no House of Arrays wants another House of Arrays to appear in their territory. If this information is reported to the House of Arrays, the House of Arrays will definitely not have a share of the law fruit. Gray nodded slightly. The other party's explanation was reasonable, but he still asked, "Then why me? Aren't you afraid that I will go back on my word?" In my opinion, any House of Arrays is possible, but only Sir won't. I don't think someone who can fight against a House of Arrays for an unrelated Violet family will go back on his word. Patriarch Arrays was a little nervous, but he still pretended to be calm. Deal, I agree. I won't take your share of the House of Arrays. Gray didn't point it out and nodded in agreement. He naturally won't rely on forces to seize the law fruit. This is a basic matter of principle and also his code of conduct. Sir, the law fruit is not far away from ripening. Please come with us to the House of Arrays to discuss the details and preparations. Patriarch Arrays sighed softly and said with a smile on his face, "Okay." Gray nodded and led Ingba and Aaron down the stairs of the hotel under the guidance of the father and son. When passing by the restaurant, Ingba couldn't help but frown slightly and look at the 7 people in the restaurant. This action was seen by the father and son of the House of Arrays. Immediately, the young man of the father and son said, "Sir, did these 7 people provoke you? They are indeed a little annoying. Can you give them some punishment for me?" Gray nodded slightly and said, "Of course, no problem." The young man happily agreed. Although the House of Arrays had already established a cooperative relationship with him, it would be better to deepen their relationship through other means. Moreover, it would only be beneficial for the House of Arrays to become friends with such a person with such great potential. Gray nodded and walked out of the hotel, ignoring the pale faces of the 7 men who overheard the conversation. The young man sneered and strode toward the 7 men. Of all the people they could provoke, they chose to provoke this lord. Even the disciples of saint-ranked forces wouldn't dare to provoke this lord casually. However, these 7 people actually dared to provoke him. "Young Master Fernando, we are disciples of the Toth family. For the sake of the Toth family, please." Seeing the young man walking over with a cold expression, the 7 of them turned pale and hurriedly begged for mercy. A top-tier family, the Toth family? The young man, Fernando, revealed a mocking smile. "Even now, you still can't see the situation clearly. I have to say that you guys are really stupid. I'll tell you the truth. If that lord wants to deal with someone, not even a Saint-class force can protect him, let alone your Torth family." "Young Master Fernan, what do you mean?" The 7 of them suddenly had a bad premonition in their hearts. One of them asked with a trembling voice, "Didn't your family receive the notice a while ago?" Fernando sneered at the 7 of them. He only spoke when he saw the drastic change in their expressions. "There's no doubt that the person you guys provoked is that lord. It's him? How can it be so coincidental? It's over, it's over." The 7 of them were as pale as a sheet of white paper. Their bodies were completely limp as they slumped back into their chairs. Their minds were blank as despair spread in their hearts. They knew that not only were they finished, but their families would also be finished if they were careless. A while ago, the sacred temple sent a message to all forces to keep a low profile and not provoke a certain person. Although they heard the order from their families, they didn't take it too seriously. The origin world was vast. Even if the nearby territories were added together, it was still tens of millions of square kilometers. The probability of encountering a person in such a vast area was too low. But they didn't expect to encounter such a low probability. They really provoked a person that even saint-level forces didn't want to provoke. That Lord wants to give you some punishment. Why did you provoke that Lord? I'm sure you know very well. You don't need me to remind you what to do, right? The young man, Fernand, said lightly. Although he didn't see what happened, he could roughly guess the reason from Ingba's impeccable beauty. It must be that the 7 of them saw Ingba's beauty and wanted to take liberties with her. He had to admit that the 7 of them were really bold. They even dared to take liberties with that lord's woman. He had never admired anyone for courting death, but now he had to admire these 7 people. Young Master Fernand, we understand. The 7 of them looked at each other with pale faces. Then, without hesitation, they bent 2 fingers and dug into their own eyes. Puff! Their bent fingers pierced into their eyes. With a sudden force, along with blood spilling out, the 7 of them actually dug out 2 bloody eyes and crushed them. Blood flowed out of their eyes. The 7 of them were as pale as paper as they spoke in a trembling voice. Young Master Fernand, is this okay? If it is not okay, we can still. This is fine, but the Toth family must have an attitude. You guys should know what to do when you go back, right? Fernand nodded and reminded them. We understand. When we go back, we will ask the family to prepare gifts and go to the House of Arrays. We will apologize to that lord and ask for forgiveness. The 7 of them endured the pain as they spoke. That's fine. I hope you guys will keep your word. Otherwise, even if that lord forgives you, the House of Arrays will not forgive you. After Fernand warned them, he turned around and left. After leaving the hotel, he took the ruined ship that the House of Arrays had parked in the plaza in the city. It took 2 days for Gray to arrive at the House of Arrays. Mr. Gray, welcome. Under the House of Arrays' highest welcome, Gray went to the House of Arrays to learn more about the Rule Fruit and prepare to depart. During this time, the leader of the Toth family and the Annihilation class elder brought expensive gifts to ask for forgiveness. Gray did not give them a hard time. After all, it was not their fault. As for the 7 of them who had made a mistake, they received the punishment they deserved. If nothing unexpected happened, the 7 of them would spend the rest of their lives in darkness. Even if they had all sorts of healing potions, it was difficult to cure a situation like losing one's eyes. Unless they were given a precious potion that could regrow broken limbs, such as a life potion. Such a thing was not something a small top-class family could get. Even if they could get it, they would not use it on the 7 of them. So, the 7 of them were destined to spend the rest of their lives in darkness. Chapter 8:17. Idiot! I have already warned you, yet you still went and provoked that guy. If you want to die, just say it. I, Basilica of the Holy Blood, can satisfy your wish. The Hall of Sacred Blood, where Gray had been staying for the past few months, belonged to the Sacred Blood Hall. The news that the Toth family had offended Gray had been immediately spread to the Hall of Sacred Blood. When he heard the news, Palace Leader Silman, who was a muscular man with red hair, roared in anger. Even he, the temple master of the Sacred Blood Hall, was not willing to provoke such an existence. Yet, the Toth family, a family that could only be ranked in the middle or lower among the top families, dared to provoke such an existence. Okay, Silman. Isn't this matter already settled? A woman with black hair said. She was the vice leader of Basilica of the Holy Blood, Lizzle. She was also the wife of Palace Leader Silman. Palace Leader Silman, who had a bad temper, was able to manage Basilica of the Holy Blood well because of her. Fortunately, it was settled. Otherwise, even if that person did not destroy the Toth family, I would have done it myself. Palace Leader Silman coldly grunted and suppressed the anger in his heart. Okay, I think we should pay more attention to the fact that he is now a guest at the House of Arrays. Vice Palace Leader Lizzle looked serious. He is now living in the House of Arrays? Palace leader Silman frowned. The House of Arrays was one of the 4 most powerful families in Basilica of the Holy Blood, but they were not liked by Basilica of the Holy Blood. 100 years ago, an Annihilation-class elder from Basilica of the Holy Blood died at the hands of the House of Arrays. Although the person who killed him committed suicide and the House of Arrays paid a great price, he became a thorn in Basilica of the Holy Blood. What is going on? It seems like the House of Arrays wants to curry favor with him, so they invited him to the House of Arrays as a guest, but Vice Palace leader Lizel's voice paused. I think this matter is not as simple as it seems. It does not seem like they want to curry favor with him, so I have ordered the Holy Palace Intelligence Department to investigate. Order the Intelligence Department to increase the number of spies. We must find out what the House of Arrays is up to. The House of Arrays, I hope you do not cause any trouble. Otherwise I will kill you, Palace leader Silman coldly grunted. A few days later, Gray and the Holy Blood, 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 was the Holy Blood, Holy Blood, Holy Blood, Holy Blood. The Death Mountain Range was extremely long and had many branches. It was a huge mountain range that covered an area of millions of square kilometers. Due to the large number of blood fiends in the mountain range, deaths occurred almost all the time. Skeletons could be seen everywhere. Some belonged to blood fiends, while others belonged to humans. This was the origin of the Death Mountain Range. In the depths of the Death Mountain Range, there were Rule-class blood beasts. Even an Annihilation-class elite might not be able to survive if they were not careful. According to the House of Arrays investigation, there were at least 5 Rule-class blood beasts in the mountains. Many Annihilation-class big shots had died in the mouths of these Rule-class blood beasts. It was truly a land of death. However, this kind of danger was naturally nothing to Gray, whose combat strength was comparable to a veteran Rule-level powerhouse. With him accompanying them, their journey was unimpeded. 5 days later, they met up with the people left behind by the House of Arrays in the Death Mountain Range to monitor the situation of the Law Fruit. Where are the Rule Fruit and the Rule Blood Beast? Gray asked as he scanned his surroundings. He didn't see any Law Fruits or Law Realm Blood Fiends. Lord Gray, the Law Fruit and the Law Rank Blood Fiend are in the mountain ahead. Arrays family's patriarch pointed towards a huge mountain in the northwest direction that was dozens of li away from here. Monitoring from so far away? Gray raised his eyebrows. It was safe to monitor from so far away, but Gray doubted whether they could monitor the Law Fruit at all times. If the Law Fruit ripened earlier than expected, he was afraid the Law Rank Blood Fiend would eat it without him knowing. There is no other way. The Law Rank Blood Fiend's senses are too sharp. Even if it is 20 to 30 miles away, they can still sense it. Arrays family's patriarch gave a wry smile. But do not worry, Lord Gray. The House of Arrays sends people to check on the situation every day. The Law Fruit has not ripened or been eaten. That's good. Gray nodded. He did not need the patriarch to tell him that. He could already guess how much risk the people who were sent to check on the situation every day were taking. The House of Arrays had probably lost many people because of this. Lord Gray, I am counting on you, Arrays family's patriarch said seriously. In fact, for the Law Fruit, the House of Arrays had already lost hundreds of people. They had even lost 2 of their Annihilation-class elders. However, even if the number of casualties doubled, the Arather family would not hesitate. After all, the value of the Law Fruit was simply too great. 1 Law Fruit was enough to create a Law Rank elite. It could make a family become a Saint-class faction. The difference between a Saint-class faction and a strong family was like a chasm. Hundreds of strong families could not compare to a Saint-class faction. So, if there was a chance to become a Saint-class faction, many factions would give it their all. Yes, but I need someone to lead the way. We need to determine the location of the Law Fruit first to prevent the Law Fruit from being damaged when we fight. Gray nodded. Of course. Array's family's patriarch immediately agreed. He knew how scary a law rank battle was. If they did not know where the law fruit was and the law fruit was destroyed, the House of Array's previous efforts would have been wasted. In the end, the House of Arrays chose a dark-skinned man to lead Gray. He took Gray to the mountain in the distance. The dark-skinned man was obviously very nervous. His body was tense, and he looked around cautiously. He was already in a state of extreme nervousness. Even a few leaves falling on the ground would alert him. "Don't be nervous. I am sure you can guess who I am. I can handle a low-rank blood beast. Even if I am discovered, it will be fine," Gray said. "Yes, Lord Gray." The dark-skinned man quickly nodded, but it was obvious that the effect was not great. It was just like before. It was not that he did not listen to Gray's words. Although he had tried his best to relax, when he thought of the low-rank blood beast, the nervousness in his heart inevitably appeared again. There was simply no way to stop it. Gray shook his head and said no more. He could understand why the other party was so nervous. If he was in the other party's shoes, his performance would not be much better. The two of them moved forward in the woods, each step extremely careful. It took them a full hour to sneak close to the mountain with the law fruit and the law-rank blood beast. My lord, there. After entering the mountain, the two of them became even more careful. After hiding for another half an hour, the dark-skinned man pointed in a direction and signaled to Gray. Gray looked in the direction the dark-skinned man was pointing and saw a short tree about a meter tall growing on a cliff. The short tree was rooted on the cliff. It was white and had a crystal-like texture. It was like a crystal tree. The leaves were flat and long, sparse, and there were only a few dozen of them. Between these dozens of leaves were two fruit. The fruits were purple and had a crystal-like texture. However, a small part of the fruit was white, as if the purple crystal was mixed with white crystal. According to the description of the book Gray had read, this was a sign that the fruit was not ripe yet. Only when the white part turned purple would the two fruits be considered ripe. Squeak, squeak. There was an ear-piercing sound of friction, accompanied by a terrifying aura that soared into the sky. Just as Gray discovered the law fruit, a behemoth also discovered Gray and the dark-skinned man. It moved its 8 huge legs, accompanied by the sound of trees collapsing, and pounced on Gray and the dark-skinned man. This was an extremely large behemoth that looked like a spider. It had 8 huge legs that were dozens of meters long and was white all over. The surface of its body was covered by a layer of carapace, and the sound of friction was made by its chelicerae and pedipalps. A spider-type low-rank blood beast, Gray had never seen a description of this spider blood beast in the book. However, judging from the aura of the other party, there was no doubt that it was a law-rank blood beast. I wonder what kind of law ability it has mastered. Although more than 100 people from the House of Arrays had died in the mouth of this spider blood beast, they had not seen it use its law-rank ability so far. It was not that this spider blood beast did not have any law-rank ability. The most likely possibility was that the people who died in the House of Arrays did not even manage to draw out its law-rank ability. Chapter 8:18. So, Gray did not choose to fight the spider blood beast there. Instead, he picked up the dark-skinned man. His body was covered in purple light as he quickly retreated. If he could lure the spider blood beast away from the Fruit of Rules, he would not have to worry about destroying the Fruit of Rules during the battle later. Crack, crack. Large patches of trees were broken. As a Rule-class blood beast, the spider blood beast was extremely fast. Its giant white body was like a giant bulldozer in the forest. Wherever it went, trees were broken and rocks were sent flying. Gray's speed was not slow either. He was an Annihilation Class 6th level. Plus, he had time rule power to accelerate. His speed was not slower than the spider blood beast. Even though the spider blood beast was chasing after him, the distance between them was not getting any closer. The spider blood beast obviously realized that Gray was difficult to deal with. The little thing in front of it was completely different from the little things that it had encountered before. It was not easy to catch or kill him. Caw-caw. Its mouth parts rubbed against each other, making ear-piercing sounds. Something strange happened. Schwa. Suddenly, in the empty space in front of Gray and the dark-skinned man, an almost transparent giant net suddenly appeared. It blocked the path of Gray and the dark-skinned man. It enveloped Gray and the dark-skinned man. Wherever it passed, tiny spatial cracks appeared in the air. This was a method whose power was enough to reach the Rule Realm. So, carrying the dark-skinned man, Gray teleported and appeared behind the giant net. He dodged the giant net that suddenly appeared. In the area covered by the giant net, all the trees and even the rocks were neatly cut into pieces under the giant net. Net Rule. Gray squinted his eyes and confirmed the rule power that the spider blood beast had mastered. Net Rule was a rule power that had two characteristics: cutting and binding. The net formed by this rule power was almost impossible to cut. Once one was enveloped by the giant net, unless one had a special ability such as teleportation, it was impossible to escape. Schwa, schwa, schwa. Giant nets appeared out of thin air one after another, enveloping Gray and the dark-skinned man. However, Gray dodged all of its attacks with ease by teleporting. Furthermore, he did not use teleportation to distance himself from the blood spider beast. Instead, he lured the blood spider beast down the mountain. Soon, Gray arrived at the foot of the mountain. As he continued to retreat, something unexpected happened. The blood spider beast stopped at the top of the mountain and did not chase after him. I've heard that many rule-level blood fiends have high intelligence, some even comparable to children. Now, it seems that this is true. However, this distance is enough. Gray put the dark-skinned man down and gestured for him to leave. After making sure that the man was quite far away, he made his move. Whoosh! He teleported and appeared on top of the blood spider beast. Buzz, with him as the center, the space maze spread out toward the spider blood beast. Schwa! Sensing the spatial fluctuations, the spider blood beast instinctively retreated with its 8 legs and formed a giant net with the rule of net, aiming at Gray. However, the giant net formed by the rule of the net suddenly disappeared when it was still a distance away from Gray, and the net flew towards an empty place. Not only that, the blood spider beast did not manage to escape from the spatial fluctuations. After retreating a few hundred meters, it was caught up by the spatial fluctuations and fell into the space maze. Boom, boom, boom. After falling into the space maze, the blood spider beast tried to escape but to no avail. It attacked Gray angrily. Giant nets appeared one after another, trying to kill Gray, the one who had used his ability. However, the giant net could not get close to Gray. Every time it was close to him, it would be teleported to attack the blood spider beast. The blood spider beast had the ability to control the giant net created by the rule of net. It could change the direction of the giant net to avoid attacks. The surrounding area was also affected. The soil, rocks, and trees were all turned into pieces under the giant net. The ground was full of grid-like cuts. Buzz, a small black ball, appeared in Gray's hand and attacked the blood spider beast through teleportation. When the blood spider beast noticed the small black ball, it was too late to dodge. Poof! The small black ball penetrated the blood spider beast's body like a cannonball and came out from the other side. A hole appeared on both sides of the blood spider beast's body. Green blood flowed out from the 2 small holes like spring water. However, the blood spider beast's body was too huge. Even though it was penetrated from the front to the back, the injury was not too serious. Gray was not surprised by this. Generally speaking, due to the difference in size, the vitality of a blood beast of the same level would be higher than that of a blood warrior of the same level, unless the blood warrior had self-healing abilities. The small black ball shot out in front of him again. Poof, poof, poof. As the small black ball shuttled back and forth, holes appeared on the surface of the blood spider beast's body. In the end, there were so many holes that it looked like a beehive. Boom! The blood spider beast's huge body fell to the ground with a loud crash, raising a cloud of dust. It trembled a few times and finally stopped breathing. Gray went forward and used his water-type ability to collect the blood. It died just like that? On a mountain more than 10 miles away, the dark-skinned man and the head of the Arrays family looked into the distance. They were shocked to see the huge body of the blood spider beast lying in the dust. The entire battle was one-sided. There was not a single wound on the Lord's body. He did not even move half a step. Perhaps not even a speck of dust was on him. On the other hand, although the blood spider beast's every attack was extremely powerful and caused the earth to tremble, its body was continuously injured. In the end, it was full of holes and died completely. Is this really the blood beast that caused the House of Arrays to lose more than 100 people? The dark-skinned man was astonished. He found it hard to believe that the blood spider beast, which could not resist the Lord, was the culprit that caused the loss of more than 100 people. Wasn't it too weak? Of course, he was only joking about it. He knew the real situation very well. The Lord must be too powerful. Even a rule-level blood beast could not resist him. He could not help but feel excited. He was lucky enough to see a rule-level elite in action. He even had close contact with this rule-level elite and led the way for him. If other people in the family knew about this, they would be envious. Unfortunately, this matter had to be kept a secret, so he could only bury it in his heart. Lord Gray, when Gray collected the blood of the spider blood beast and stuffed its corpse into the plane, the people of the Arather family had already come up to greet him. Everyone looked at Gray with eyes full of respect, and some even had looks of admiration. Although they had heard of Gray's achievements, they still had some doubts. It was because Gray was too young. Under normal circumstances, reaching the annihilation level at his age was already considered a good talent. It was almost impossible for him to reach the giant level. However, he had surpassed the giant level and reached the rule level. He could fight against a rule-level elite. This was too unbelievable, so they still had some doubts. Now they believed it. Even the rule-level blood fiend could not resist at all. There was no doubt that the other party had rule-level combat power. Moreover, it was not at an ordinary level. It was indeed as rumored that he could contend against veteran rule-level experts. The group could not wait to climb the mountain. They came to the cliff and saw the rule fruit. Elder Colin, how long will it take for it to ripen? The head of the Arrays family asked excitedly. Yes, family head. From the House of Arrays, an old man with a white beard walked out and approached the rule fruit. He looked carefully and concluded after a while. It will ripen in a month at most. Great! Whether it was Gray or the people of the House of Arrays, they could not help but look happy. The opportunity to achieve rule level was close at hand. They would be able to obtain it in a month at most. Set up tents around the cliff. Protect the rule fruit well. Yes, family head. The head of the Arrays family ordered excitedly. The people of the House of Arrays responded excitedly. As long as they obtained the rule fruit, the House of Arrays would definitely give birth to a rule-level elite. At that time, they just had to endure for a while and become a veteran rule-level elite. Even the Basilica of the Holy Blood would not be able to do anything to them. The House of Arrays would become a saint-level organization. 3 weeks later, the rule fruit on the cliff suddenly emitted a rich fragrance. Smelling this fragrance, the people of the House of Arrays were completely excited. Even Gray could not help but feel slightly excited. The rule fruit was about to ripen. The smell will definitely attract the surrounding blood beasts. Be careful. We must not let the blood beasts snatch the rule fruit. The head of the Arrays family ordered excitedly. He then turned to Gray and spoke politely. Lord Gray, this place is deep in the Death Mountain range. There are many powerful blood beasts here. I'm afraid we will need Lord Gray to take action. I know. I will take action when you can't stop them. Suppressing the excitement in his heart, Gray nodded. Screech. It was a giant eagle with a wingspan of 100 meters. Roar. Its body was more than 50 meters long. It was like a giant beast moving a mountain. In just a few minutes, blood beasts were attracted by the smell. The people of the House of Arrays immediately fought with these blood beasts. Although the smell of the rule-level blood beasts still lingered, the smell of the rule fruit had already made these blood beasts lose their minds. Even though they knew this was the territory of the rule-level blood beasts, they did not hesitate to come. Screech. A giant bird with feathers like metal broke through the blockade of the House of Arrays and rushed toward the rule fruit. This giant bird must have eaten some evolution medicine. Its power was beyond the annihilation class. It was not far from the giant level. However, this level was nothing in front of Gray. Screech. He used his Rule of Time ability. The giant bird, which had been so ferocious a moment ago, suddenly turned into a skeleton and fell to the ground. Screech. Screech. After killing 5 of these blood beasts, the rule fruit's fragrance suddenly became stronger. Gray turned his head and saw that the white parts of the rule fruit had turned completely purple. It's ripened. This was the sign that the rule fruit had ripened. The rule fruit had ripened. Gray immediately teleported to the rule fruit tree to pick the rule fruit. At this moment, poof! From the cliff, a figure suddenly rushed out and went straight for the rule fruit tree. Each of his hands grabbed a rule fruit. The latest chapter of The Divine Blood Warrior came to the website. Chapter 819. Not good, someone is hiding in the dark. Although they were fighting with the blood fiends, many people in the House of Arrays did not forget to pay attention to the fruit. When they saw a figure suddenly appear from the cliff and pounce on the fruit, they were shocked and angry, their faces full of anxiety. There was someone hiding in the cliff and waiting, and before this they did not notice it at all. Courting death. Gray roared, a cold light flashing in his eyes. There was actually someone who dared to act like an Oriole in front of him, trying to snatch the law fruit away from him. It was too late to teleport. The other party could definitely take the 2 fruits before he teleported, but he sneered and looked coldly at the figure pouncing on the fruit. His things were not so easy to steal. Whoosh! Just as the figure was about to touch the fruit, a strange scene occurred. The figure suddenly disappeared from the fruit, and when it reappeared, it was already a few miles away from the fruit. Regarding the rule fruit, Gray naturally attached great importance to it. Therefore, when the fragrance of the fruit began to waft, he had already set up a space maze. The area around the fruit tree was especially important. There were teleportation points all around, and no one could get close except for him. This was just a precautionary measure. The main purpose was to guard against the blood fiends, but he did not expect that it would be used on someone. There was actually someone hiding in the dark, spying on the fruit. Whoosh! Teleporting to the fruit tree, Gray plucked the 2 fruits and placed them in a special crystal box that could preserve the effect of the fruit. After keeping the crystal box in his space item, he looked at the person who was trying to steal the fruit. It was a man with a short stature, only about 1.5 meters tall. He was wearing a khaki-colored battlesuit, and if one did not look carefully, one would think that he was a child. The other party must have an earth ability and used it to hide in the rocks, waiting for an opportunity to act. However, what made Gray a little puzzled was that during this period, he and the people from the House of Arrays had used their earth ability to search the entire mountain several times, but they did not find the other party. He did not know how the other party avoided their detection. After failing to steal the fruit, the short man panicked and hurriedly dived into the soil. Unfortunately, not long after he dived into the soil, his figure was once again teleported to the outside world. Even within the soil and rocks, there were still teleportation points for the spatial maze. If not for the fact that the spatial maze couldn't be maintained for a long time, the short man would have already lurked inside the mountain before he could use the spatial maze. The short man wouldn't even be able to get close to the law fruit tree. "How do you want to die?" Gray said coldly as he looked at the short man. The killing intent in his eyes was like the cold wind of winter. No, the short man only felt a chill continuously pouring into his body, and an extreme sense of crisis surfaced in his heart. He screamed and wanted to drill into the ground again. However, Gray did not give him the chance. The small black ball appeared and tore through space, leaving a long crack in the air. It turned into a black light and attacked the short man. Stop! A thunderous roar reverberated through the air, causing the entire mountain peak to tremble and rocks to tumble down. Some of the weaker humans and blood fiends actually felt dizzy after hearing this roar. Their bodies went limp and fell to the ground uncontrollably. At the same time, a blood-red light, like a blood-red rainbow, came from the sky and whistled towards Gray. Hearing the roar and perceiving the blood-red light, Gray remained unmoved. The small black ball continued to attack the short man. Puff! The short man's entire body was pierced through and blood flowed out. He could no longer maintain his body in the air, and fell to the ground with a thud. He smashed into the ground, staining the ground red with blood. His body trembled slightly a few times, and then he was no longer breathing. His breathing stopped, and the heat quickly disappeared from his body. On the other side, the blood-red light suddenly disappeared when it was still a few miles away from Gray. When it reappeared, it had already attacked a mountain that extended for more than 10 miles. This mountain that extended for more than 10 miles disappeared, as if it had been corroded by something. The smell of blood filled the air, and a blood-red river flowed in all directions, as if it was formed by blood. Gray looked in the direction of the blood-red light and saw more than a dozen figures flying quickly in that direction. The aura emitted by each of them was at least at the level of a giant. One of them was a burly old man with blood-red hair. His aura pierced through the world, and the smell of blood soared into the sky. It was as if there was a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood under his feet. "I told you to stop." The blood-haired old man's eyes were the same as his hair. They were also blood-red. When he opened and closed them, there seemed to be a blood-red light shining out. One could vaguely see a world where corpses were piled up into mountains and blood gathered into rivers. "I heard you, but I refuse," Gray said indifferently as he looked at the blood-haired old man. The power of that attack that had made a mountain that extended for more than 10 miles disappear, and the aura that swept through the world all showed that the blood-haired old man in front of him was a rule-level powerhouse. During this period, the frequency of him encountering rule-level powerhouses was too high. He had encountered them several times in a row. However, what kind of strength determined what kind of circle one had. With his rule-level strength, the circle he belonged to was naturally at the rule level. The probability of encountering a rule-level powerhouse naturally increased greatly. "You're courting death." The blood-red light in the blood-haired old man's eyes soared, and his entire body exuded a thick smell of blood. It was as if a world of corpses and a sea of blood really appeared. He was like the king of this world of corpses and a sea of blood, sitting on a throne piled up with bones under his feet. Lord Rudolph, although this person is not at the rule level, his combat strength is not weaker than a veteran rule-level powerhouse. Basilica of the Holy Blood should avoid conflict with this person as much as possible. A black-haired woman hurriedly advised in a low voice. She was Basilica of the Holy Blood's Deputy Palace Master, Lizzer. The intelligence ability of a saint-level organization was very terrifying. Not only did they have many spies, but they also had all kinds of talents to inquire about information. Among them, there were even rare talents who had soul abilities and mind-reading abilities. Under their full operation, some seemingly secret information would quickly surface. This was the case with the news of the rule-level fruit. This was also the reason why they had appeared here. Hearing Deputy Palace Master Lizzer's words, Saint Rudolph forcefully suppressed the anger in his heart. The other party was able to suppress a veteran rule-level powerhouse, the Sun Saint, and force the Sun Saint to compromise. This already showed the other party's strength. With a cold snort, he looked at the people of the House of Arrays, whose faces were already pale. His voice was dignified and unquestionable. House of Arrays, you're really lucky to have discovered such a good thing. Give the House of Arrays rule-level fruit to Basilica of the Holy Blood. Do you have any objections? After learning about the rule-level fruit, Basilica of the Holy Blood attached great importance to it. They formed an elite team led by a rule-level powerhouse and secretly came here, hiding in the dark, waiting for an opportunity to snatch it. Originally, they wanted to snatch both rule-level fruits, but they failed. It was extremely difficult to snatch the rule-level fruit from the hands of the other party. Fortunately, according to what he knew, the other party had an agreement with the House of Arrays. One of the rule-level fruits belonged to the House of Arrays. Since they could not snatch it from the other party, they could only ask the House of Arrays for it. He did not believe that the House of Arrays had the courage to refuse. No, we can't hand it over. The rule-level fruit is the hope of the House of Arrays. We can't hand it over. Hearing Basilica of the Holy Blood forcefully asking for the rule-level fruit, the pale faces of the people of the House of Arrays turned red with anger. The rule-level fruit was the hope of the House of Arrays to become a saint-level organization. For the rule-level fruit, the House of Arrays lost more than 100 people. It was a heavy loss. And now, Basilica of the Holy Blood actually relied on her powerful strength to shamelessly ask the House of Arrays for the rule-level fruit. This made the accumulated anger of being suppressed by Basilica of the Holy Blood completely erupt. Master, we can't hand it over. At most, we'll fight it out with them. Some of the hot-blooded youths had scarlet eyes and clenched their fists so tightly that their fingers dug into their flesh without them realizing it. The master of the House of Arrays was full of grievances. He raised his hand to stop the people of the House of Arrays from continuing to speak to avoid angering Basilica of the Holy Blood. He clenched his teeth and spoke. The House of Arrays is willing to hand over the rule-level fruit that belongs to the House of Arrays. Grievances, extreme grievances, but there was no other way. Facing the powerful Basilica of the Holy Blood, the House of Arrays had no other choice but to hand over the rule-level fruit that belonged to them. The rule-level fruit was the hope of the House of Arrays to become a saint-level force. But if they didn't hand over the fruit, the House of Arrays would definitely be exterminated. Good, at least you know what's good for you. This time, I won't argue with the House of Arrays. Seeing the master of the House of Arrays' face full of grievances but still hand over the fruit, Saint Rudolph smiled contemptuously. A mere powerful family didn't have the courage to go against Basilica of the Holy Blood. Sure enough, they obediently handed it over. It seems that they're not convinced. After this time, we'll have to give them a beating. That's true. Indeed, it's time to give them a beating. They actually didn't report to Basilica of the Holy Blood when they got the fruit. If it wasn't for the rule-level fruit, we might as well have just exterminated them. Looking at the sullen faces of the people of the House of Arrays, the voices of the leaders were filled with pride. They were unscrupulous and didn't care that the people of the House of Arrays would hear it. Or rather, they were deliberately saying it for the House of Arrays to hear. Deputy Palace Lord Lizelle raised her eyebrows but didn't say anything. Instead, she looked at Gray and said, "Your Excellency, you've heard it. The House of Arrays has already handed over the fruit that belonged to them to Basilica of the Holy Blood. Please give it to us." Gray's eyes swept across the people of Basilica of the Holy Blood and the people of the House of Arrays. He saw that the people of Basilica of the Holy Blood were full of pride and ridicule, while the people of the House of Arrays were full of anger and grievances. He had a plan in mind and the corner of his mouth rose. "I refuse." Chapter 8:20. Refuse. This guy refuses to hand it over. Hearing Gray's answer, the leaders of Basilica of the Holy Blood were stunned at first, then they became furious and stared at Gray with fire in their eyes. "Bastard, how dare you snatch Basilica of the Holy Blood's things? Kill him! You're courting death." Endless anger was burning and gushing. As a saint-ranked organization, it had always been them who snatched other people's things, and no one had ever snatched theirs. But now, someone actually wanted to snatch their things, which made them furious. Their anger seemed to want to burn everything. However, they didn't realize that at this moment they were very similar to the people from the House of Arrays who were forced to hand over the law fruit. Your Excellency, this is the agreement between you and the House of Arrays. Deputy Palace Master Lizelle was also very angry, but she suppressed the anger in her heart and said coldly, "This is indeed the agreement between me and the House of Arrays, but the House of Arrays has already given up, so both of the law fruits belong to me." Gray said playfully, "The House of Arrays didn't give up, they just handed over the law fruit that belonged to them to Basilica of the Holy Blood." Deputy Palace Master Lizelle argued, "But the meaning is the same as giving up. Since the House of Arrays has already given up, the law fruit naturally belongs to me. As for you, Basilica of the Holy Blood, the agreement between me and the House of Arrays didn't include you, Basilica of the Holy Blood." Gray sneered. If it belonged to the House of Arrays, he naturally wouldn't take it by force. The agreement must be kept. This was a matter of principle. However, since the House of Arrays had already been snatched by Basilica of the Holy Blood and no longer belonged to the House of Arrays, he naturally wouldn't be polite. Basilica of the Holy Blood stole the House of Arrays, so why couldn't he steal Basilica of the Holy Blood? Since he came out to rob, he had to be prepared to be robbed. He had no psychological burden to rob a habitual offender like Basilica of the Holy Blood. "How dare you come to me, Basilica of the Holy Blood?" An angry voice came out of Saint Rudolph's mouth. His blood-red eyes stared at Gray. Endless murderous intent burst out, and the image of a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood seemed to appear around him. "Do you really think you can be so arrogant in front of me, Basilica of the Holy Blood, after exchanging a few moves with that old man Ryan? In terms of arrogance, Basilica of the Holy Blood, I am ashamed of my inferiority." Gray was not afraid of the terrifying aura at all as he said coldly, "Well, since that old man Ryan can't kill you, I'll kill you." Saint Rudolph's blood-red hair stood up because of anger, like an angry blood lion. Clatter! Above the sky, a crack appeared, and from the crack, a blood-red river surged out. A strong smell of blood filled the air, as if it was formed by blood. The figures of blood beasts and people could be vaguely seen in it. Boom! The blood-red river broke through the space, leaving a series of space cracks in the air, and crashed into the space maze. The terrifying power was released in the space maze. Crack! Several space transmission points collapsed. The blood-red river passed through the space transmission points. Not only did the space transmission points fail to transfer the blood-red river, but they were also corroded and collapsed under the blood-red river. The blood-red river continued to crash into Gray unimpeded. Although the space transmission points in the space maze had the effect of transferring attacks, there was also a limit. This was the nature of things. Nothing could escape from it. At this time, Saint Rudolph's attack had obviously exceeded the limit of the space transmission point. Enhance! A rhythmic voice sounded from Gray's mouth. Gray used Enhance, a derivative ability of the Rule of Curse. His basic ability immediately soared, reaching a level comparable to the Rule of Destruction from level 6. And with this basic ability comparable to the Rule of Destruction, the space transmission points in the space maze suddenly became much more stable. Then he took out the Sun Sword and increased the power of the space maze with the ability of the Rule of Destruction. Suddenly, the space transmission points in the space maze became more stable. Clatter! The blood-red river was only a few hundred meters away from Gray and was about to hit him. But in the next moment, the blood-red river suddenly disappeared. It changed direction, crashed out of the space maze, and aggressively attacked Saint Rudolph and Basilica of the Holy Blood. Humph! Saint Rudolph snorted, and the aggressive blood-red river suddenly stopped its momentum. It changed direction in the air, like a river changing its course, and crashed into gray again. At the rule of destruction level, the strength was not only reflected in the power, but also in the perfect control of the rule of destruction ability. Some rules could even allow the owner to have absolute control of their own rule of destruction ability. Even the rule of destruction ability was completely under their control. His rule of blood could achieve absolute control. Although the blood-red river had left his body, it was still under his control as if it was a part of his body. Clatter! The blood-red river once again rushed into the spatial maze. The surging power caused spatial cracks to appear in the spatial maze. Absolute control! Gray narrowed his eyes in the layers of space transmission points. The characteristics of the blood-red river were similar to the pitch-black ball. They both had the characteristic of absolute control of the ability user. The pitch-black ball appeared in front of him. The next moment, it passed through a space transmission point and suddenly appeared in front of the blood-red river, colliding with it. Clatter! At the point of collision, a dull shock wave spread, and the surrounding area was full of dense space cracks, like a broken circular mirror. The blood-red river exploded inch by inch and collapsed, turning into countless blood-red liquids splashing everywhere. The pitch-black ball had lost all of its power. Relying on its connection with Gray, it automatically flew back. Clatter! St. Rudolph's face was cold. Another blood-red river appeared, slightly deviating from the angle and crashing into the space maze from the other side. A similar scene appeared. Clatter! The pitch-black ball met it head-on, and dense space cracks appeared. The blood-red river collapsed, and the pitch-black ball turned back to Gray's side. Clatter, clatter, clatter! In a very short period of time, the blood-red river and the pitch-black ball had collided dozens of times. The huge mountain where the rule fruit tree grew had disappeared under the shock wave of the collision. Not only that, but even the surrounding area of dozens of miles was razed to the ground under the terrifying shock wave. The ground was blood-red, as if it was soaked in blood. There were no traces of life. All life had been corroded and disappeared under the blood-red color. The tyrannical power remained in this place. Even after hundreds or thousands of years, not a blade of grass would grow here, and it would still be a dead land for life. He blocked Sir Rudolph's attack. His combat power is indeed not weaker than a veteran rule-level powerhouse. I heard that in the battle with the Holy Temple of Sun, St. Rudolph was completely suppressed by him. If he did not beg for mercy, he might have died on the spot. Will Sir Rudolph suffer a loss? Seeing the battle between the two rule-level existences, whether it was the people of Basilica of the Holy Blood or the people of the House of Arrays, they all retreated as if they were avoiding snakes and scorpions, for fear of being affected. The powerhouses of Basilica of the Holy Blood gathered together. Although they had just clamored to kill Gray, some of them could not help but look worried at this time. Gray's battle record was real, and there was not the slightest bit of falsehood. They naturally knew this very well. Don't praise others and diminish your own prestige. That kid is as thin as a monkey. How can he be a match for Sir Rudolph? Hall Master Cellarman, who had blood-red hair, scolded in dissatisfaction. Although he was also a powerhouse, he was tall and burly, and he had a deep understanding of the laws. He had a suppressive force that surpassed ordinary powerhouses. Don't worry. Sir Rudolph once had a battle record of fighting against 3 rule-level powerhouses. He's definitely one of the strongest among the veteran rule-level powerhouses, Vice Hall Master Cellarman said. Deputy Palace Master Lizzer also spoke. Although she was speechless that Palace Master Cellarman was judging the strength of a person based on their weight, she was also very confident in St. Rudolph's strength. As veteran rule-level powerhouses, there was naturally a difference in strength. St. Rudolph was recognized as one of the strongest veteran rule-level powerhouses because of his battle record of fighting against 3 rule-level powerhouses. He does have some strength. No wonder he dares to be so arrogant. The blood-red river was blocked again. Saint Rudolph's face was cold, and his blood-red hair stood up without wind. He stood in the void, wrapped in a tragic aura, and his murderous aura soared into the sky. He was like a killing god who had walked out of a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. His killing intent soared into the sky, and the clouds in the sky were pierced by this soaring killing intent. At the level of the rule level, there was no absolute boundary between reality and illusion. Even pressure could form a physical attack. Crack! As if something had shattered, a blood-red world appeared behind him, and a terrifying aura appeared. In the blood-red world, blood-red light soared into the sky. Corpses piled up into mountains, and blood gathered into rivers. One could vaguely see the corpses of rule-level blood beasts, as well as the corpses of rule-level powerhouses that were not large in size but had terrifying auras. There was naturally a reason why he was recognized as one of the strongest veteran rule-level powerhouses. The reason was his rule-level ability. He had mastered two types of rules. One was the blood rule and the other was the mist rule. The two rules merged and formed a special domain that he named Blood Domain. This domain had a shocking characteristic. The more blood it integrated, the stronger it would be. Over the past 10,000 years, he had integrated too much powerful blood into it. This was the reason why he could rely on his status as a veteran rule-level powerhouse to fight against 3 rule-level powerhouses. Whoosh, whoosh. A blood-red river that was even larger than before appeared. No, it could no longer be called a blood-red river. It should be called a blood-red sea. Blood-red light soared into the sky, and a tragic aura filled the air. Just flowing forward had already caused a huge crack to appear in space. Crack, crack. The blood-red sea crashed into the spatial maze. One spatial teleportation point after another shattered under the terrifying destructive power of the blood-red sea. The blood-red sea crashed into gray like a real sea. Chapter 8:21. This power? Gray's pupils constricted. In his eyes, one spatial teleportation point after another did not even last a moment before being destroyed by the sea of blood. Spatial teleportation points could move objects, and they could also move attacks. Logically speaking, all the attacks that were aimed at him should have been moved away. However, the sea of blood's absolute destructive power shattered the teleportation points before they could even take effect. The powerful destructive power had almost surpassed the destructive power of a veteran rule-level powerhouse. In terms of combat power, this person was ranked second among all the low-rank experts that Gray had seen. Who was first? Naturally, it was Saint Koro of the Spacetime Temple. Through the law of seas, this person possessed at least 5 low-rank abilities. Just his aura alone was enough to shatter space. One could only imagine how powerful he was. Even now, Gray could not help but feel a lingering fear. Even with the taboo ability of Return to the Past, he could not help but feel that it was a miracle that he could escape from this person. Whoosh! The pitch-black ball passed through the teleportation point and slammed into the sea of blood. Bang! The sea of blood only trembled slightly, but it had already bounced the small black ball away. The sea of blood, on the other hand, continued to smash towards Gray without losing any of its momentum. The spatial teleportation points along the way were all shattered by this terrifying power. In an extremely short amount of time, the spatial maze that stretched for more than 10 li was swept away. Moreover, the sea of blood continued to spread forward, spreading toward the horizon. Everywhere it passed was barren land with no signs of life. White bones were piled up, forming a barren land of over 100 li dead. That guy's dead. Haha, as expected, that guy was no match for Lord Rudolph. Seeing this shocking scene, which they would never forget for the rest of their lives, and seeing the lifeless Crimson Land, the Hall of Sacred Blood's big shots went forward with pride and excitement. He had not even reached the law rank, yet he could contend against veteran law rank experts and suppress the Sun Holy Temple, forcing them to make concessions. Just how awe-inspiring was that? But in front of Basilica of the Holy Blood, wasn't he still dead? As a member of Basilica of the Holy Blood, a deep sense of pride filled their hearts. You dare to go against me, Basilica of the Holy Blood. This is what happens to you. Cellarman, the master of the Hall of Sacred Blood, said proudly. Only the vice-master, Lizer, frowned and asked Saint Rudolph respectfully. Master Rudolph, what happened to that man? Although she believed in the strength of Saint Rudolph and thought that the winner would be Saint Rudolph from the very beginning, she knew that Saint Rudolph, who had the ability of 3 rules, was not simple. He escaped, Saint Rudolph said regretfully. His whole body was filled with murderous intent. It took him a while to retract his murderous intent. What? Escaped? Under such circumstances, he was still able to escape. The excitement on the faces of the Basilica of the Holy Blood giants stiffened. It was as if a basin of cold water had been poured over them. Although Saint Rudolph had won this battle, Basilica of the Holy Blood did not gain any advantage. The 2 law fruits were in the hands of the opponent. In other words, Basilica of the Holy Blood had even sent out a saint on a major operation, but they had not gained anything. There was an inexplicable anger in their hearts that they had nowhere to vent. Immediately, someone stared at the people of the House of Arrays angrily. Damn it, it's all the House of Arrays' fault. If the House of Arrays had informed Basilica of the Holy Blood immediately, the 2 law fruits would have been mine. This kind of traitor, we should just destroy them. That's right, destroy the House of Arrays. Murderous intents burst out from the Annihilation Giants one after another. They joined together to suppress the people of the House of Arrays. Everyone, please understand. The House of Arrays has agreed to give the law fruits to Basilica of the Holy Blood. This has nothing to do with the House of Arrays. Under the scary presence, the people of the House of Arrays were all pressed to the ground, unable to move. Only a few of the Annihilation Giants could barely stand, but their faces were all pale. The leader of the House of Arrays suppressed his endless anger toward Basilica of the Holy Blood and forced himself to speak under the pressure. Surprisingly, he did not hate Grey, who had caused the House of Arrays to be in such a dangerous situation. Even if Han Shao had not taken the law fruits, after this, Basilica of the Holy Blood would most likely attack the House of Arrays. When he heard that Grey had escaped and even taken the 2 law fruits, he felt a sense of relief. Although I did not get them, Basilica of the Holy Blood did not get them either. They bullied and humiliated our Arather clan, treating us like livestock and wantonly plundering us. Now, they've suffered a loss at the hands of Lord Grey. This is what they mean by evil people will be dealt with by evil people. Today, the House of Arrays might be destroyed, but he knew that Basilica of the Holy Blood would not have an easy time in the future. Master Grey had not achieved the law fruits, yet he already had such combat power. He could easily escape from Basilica of the Holy Blood's law fruits and make Basilica of the Holy Blood helpless. Once he achieved the law fruits, how strong would he be? With 2 law fruits, it was almost certain that Master Grey achieved the law fruit. He believed that Basilica of the Holy Blood would have a terrifying enemy in the future. It might even be destroyed. Don't leave a single one alive. Kill them all. Basilica of the Holy Blood's Hall Master Cellarman said coldly with murderous intent. Many powerhouses responded with murderous intent, ready to pounce on the people of the House of Arrays. Wait a minute. At this moment a voice stopped them. It was Deputy Hall Master Lizer. This matter indeed has nothing to do with the House of Arrays. There's no need to vent your anger on the House of Arrays. But if the House of Arrays did not hide this matter and secretly contacted that kid, how could all the law fruits have fallen into his hands? Hall Master Cellarman said angrily. If it were anyone else who stopped him, he would not have cared at all. However, the Deputy Hall Master and his wife's identity forced him to listen. When the House of Arrays agreed to hand over the law fruits, Master Rudolph had already decided not to bicker with the House of Arrays. If he went back on his word, the other saint-class organizations would laugh at Basilica of the Holy Blood. Deputy Hall Master Lizard shook her head. Hearing Vice Palace Master Lizard's words, Palace Master Silerman and the other leaders couldn't help but frown. It was reasonable, but if they didn't kill the Array's family members, they wouldn't feel at ease. Forget it. This matter indeed has nothing to do with the House of Arrays. Let's stop here. At this moment, Saint Rudolph's voice sounded. Hearing his words, Hall Master Sellerman and the other powerhouses calmed down their murderous intent. Even if they were powerhouses, they still had to listen to the words of a saint. Let's go. After glancing at the people of the House of Arrays, Saint Rudolph flew forward. The other powerhouses of Basilica of the Holy Blood hurriedly followed. The reason why they decided not to destroy the House of Arrays was that they had already made a promise. Below that, there was a more fundamental reason, but neither he nor Deputy Hall Master Lizard said it out loud. After obtaining the law fruit, it was inevitable that the other party would attain the law fruit. With such strength now, how strong would the other party be after attaining the law fruit? At that time, even Saint Rudolph did not have absolute confidence in suppressing the other party. The other party and the House of Arrays seemed to only have a cooperative relationship. After the cooperation ended, they would have nothing to do with each other. However, if the other party knew that the House of Arrays was destroyed because of Saint Rudolph, it was very likely that the other party would take revenge on Basilica of the Holy Blood. Judging from the other party's character of coming to the Holy Sun Temple for an unrelated family, it was very likely that the other party would come to Basilica of the Holy Blood because of the House of Arrays. Even if Saint Rudolph could defeat the other party again, what if the other party hid in the dark and attacked the other members of Basilica of the Holy Blood? At that time, other than Saint Rudolph, everyone would be in danger. No matter how deep the hatred between the saint-level forces was, it was very rare for them to wipe out the opposing forces. This was because they were worried that such a situation would develop. There's still such a low-rank powerhouse among the veteran law ranks. He's probably strong enough to contend with a 3-law-rank powerhouse. Tens of thousands of kilometers away, Gray's figure appeared with a solemn expression. The other party's combat strength was close to that of a 3-law-rank powerhouse. Even if he was not the strongest among the veteran law-rank powerhouses, he was definitely one of the strongest. According to the people I sent out to investigate, it's been confirmed that there's a 3-law-rank powerhouse. Why does it feel like the overall combat strength of the origin world 500,000 years ago was stronger than the era I was in? In Gray's era, apart from Saint Koro, who was in existence that exceeded common sense, the peak combat strength of the origin world was generally at the level of veteran law-rank powerhouses. There might be 3 law-rank powerhouses, but he had never heard of any law-rank powerhouse who was a 3-law-rank powerhouse. However, 500,000 years ago, although there were not many confirmed third-level rule-level experts, there were already quite a few of them. From this point of view, the overall battle prowess of 500,000 years ago was generally higher than that of his era. What's the reason? Gray raised his eyebrows. He felt that there must be something hidden. Perhaps something had happened in the past 500,000 years that caused the overall combat strength of the origin world to weaken. Forget it. The most important thing now is to break through to the law rank. After entering the plane he had created, Gray took out a crystal box containing law fruits and opened it, revealing a purple crystal-like law fruit. According to the classification of magic power medicinal herbs, law fruits should be considered level 7 magic power medicinal herbs. If they could be refined into a corresponding magic power potion, it would be enough for 4 to 5 people to consume. However, under normal circumstances, it would be consumed directly because one needed to be at least a level 7 alchemist master to refine a level 7 magic power potion. Such an existence had never been heard of in history. He picked up the law fruit. It was cold like a frozen fruit. When he bit down, his mouth was filled with coldness. Apart from that, there was also a strong fragrance that lingered in his mouth. Some were like honey peaches, but they were even more fragrant. There was also a sticky and sweet juice oozing out from the place where he had bitten. In order to prevent the medicinal effect from being wasted, Gray swallowed it quickly. He took out the Book of Spatial Laws and used the mystic technique to comprehend the laws. Immediately, a different feeling surfaced in his heart. Chapter 8:22. This was a very relaxed feeling. Gray had never felt so relaxed before. It was as if his mind had suddenly been enlightened. His mind became unusually clear. It was as if he was originally doing a complicated function problem. Every step was difficult. Suddenly, the complicated function problem had become simple addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. He did not even need to use a pen to calculate. Just a little mental calculation was enough to get the correct answer. The role of the law fruit was to increase the user's affinity with the rules. It allowed the user to feel the rules more clearly, making it easier to comprehend the rules. It became easier to comprehend the rules, so it was naturally easier to become a rule. Under normal circumstances, an annihilation-grade giant with the help of a precious magic herb like the law fruit could increase the chances of becoming a rule by more than 50%. One could imagine how precious such a precious magic herb was. In fact, the reason why St. Class Factions had endless law class experts was not because St. Class Factions had many geniuses and could guarantee the birth of a law class expert every tens of thousands of years, allowing St. Class Factions to have an endless supply of law class expert. It was because St. Class Factions usually had similar magic herbs as a foundation. When the veteran law class experts were about to die, they would take them out and let the giants with the most potential take them. A law class expert would be born, ensuring that there would be an endless supply of law class experts. Under the effect of the law fruit, Gray's comprehension speed of space law, which was already extremely fast due to his super memory ability, had increased again. All kinds of space mysteries quickly flashed through his mind, enriching his comprehension of space law ability. Other than resting and eating time, Gray spent almost all his time comprehending the rules. As a result, his comprehension of space law ability would greatly increase every day. Originally, he only knew how to use the various derivative abilities of space law. He could not understand their various operating mechanisms and could not maximize their power. However, as his comprehension of space law ability deepened, not only could he use it, but he could also maximize its power. This kind of improvement that he could feel was extremely wonderful. He was almost immersed in it and could not extricate himself. 2 years later, Gray, who was sitting cross-legged on the grass with his eyes closed, suddenly opened his eyes. In an instant, space seemed to appear and disappear in his eyes. A feeling of perfection emerged in his heart. He felt that he could no longer comprehend the laws of space. He had already comprehended the various mysteries of the laws of space. At this moment, he seemed to have sensed something and suddenly looked up at the sky. Whoosh! Suddenly, a silver light appeared in the sky, slanting downwards and converging, enveloping him within. He didn't use his ability, but his body floated up into the sky uncontrollably. The silver light turned into a halo and attached to him, making him look like a god. If an ordinary person saw him now, they would probably immediately kneel on the ground and worship him as a god. Rule-level experts had a lifespan of tens of thousands of years. In essence, they had already surpassed the category of humans and became a new species. Possessing a lifespan of tens of thousands of years, possessing the power to destroy the heavens and the earth with a wave of his hand, such a person, if not a god in the eyes of ordinary people, what was he? The world laws were trembling violently, resonating with Gray. The intense trembling of the laws quickly spread. If they were not in their own plane, even rule-level experts thousands of miles away would be able to feel the powerful fluctuations. As Gray resonated with the laws, the blood power in his body was also undergoing a rapid transformation. Its color was changing rapidly, from green to silver after the transformation of the wood-type ability. Its texture was becoming viscous, as if it was transforming from the original liquid to viscous mercury. In the end, the color of the blood power turned silver, and its texture became viscous mercury. At this moment, the power of blood began to circulate in his body, circulating endlessly in his body. As it circulated, the strength of his soul and body began to transform like the blood power. At the annihilation level, the transformation relied on the transformation of a single elemental ability. The transformation of this elemental ability would lead to the transformation of the blood power, soul, and body. Then, one of the three would lead to the transformation of the other two. At the rule level, the blood power, soul, and body had become extremely powerful. A single elemental ability could no longer trigger a transformation. Only a rule-level ability could continue to trigger a transformation. This was the way to achieve the rule level, and it was also the cultivation method after the rule level. After a few hours, Gray's blood power, soul, and body had all completed the transformation. The world laws let out a violent tremor, and then it returned to calm. The silver halo gradually dissipated, and Gray was in the silver halo. His originally hazy figure became clear. He stood in the void without using any ability. His clothes and black hair fluttered, and a unique temperament appeared on his body. With a thought, he floated down like a falling leaf and landed beside the wooden house. There, Ingba and the little boy Aaron, who had watched Gray's process of achieving the world's principles, were both shocked. It wasn't until Gray approached that the two of them recovered. "Congratulations, Lord Gray, for achieving the rule level," Ingba congratulated, and the little boy Alan excitedly expressed his admiration. Gray smiled in response. He was naturally very happy to have achieved the rule level. After spending a few days comprehending the various differences after achieving the rule level, after resting for a day, Gray did not leave the world plane. Instead, he took out a second rule fruit, swallowed it, and continued to comprehend his second rule ability. Under normal circumstances, after achieving the rule level, one would generally stop comprehending the rule level. After all, there was no second rule in one's body, and there were no precious magic herbs that could assist in comprehending the rule level. However, Gray's situation was different. Not only did he have a second rule ability, but he also had a third or even a fourth rule ability. In addition, he also had a second rule fruit that could assist in comprehending the rule level. Both conditions were met, so he began to comprehend his second rule ability. This time, the rule ability he comprehended was the rule of time. The cultivation of the rule level was the process of implanting a rule bloodline and comprehending the rule level. For people other than Gray, implanting a rule bloodline was the most difficult and even extremely dangerous. With the lifespan of a rule powerhouse of tens of thousands of years, even if their comprehension was poor, they could still comprehend the rule level. However, implanting a rule bloodline was different. Bloodlines had a repulsive nature. Implanting a new rule bloodline on top of one's rule bloodline that already had a rule bloodline in one's body was bound to have an extremely strong repulsive nature. Even with the powerful body of a rule powerhouse, it was very likely that they would be injured by this repulsive nature. In serious cases, their realm might even drop and they would be left with injuries that would be difficult to recover from for the rest of their lives. There were even some who would lose their minds and become bloodthirsty beasts. In history, there were records of rule powerhouses who failed to implant a rule bloodline and often became beasts. The saint-level forces they belonged to were slaughtered by the rule powerhouses who had turned into beasts. The strength of the rule powerhouses who had turned into beasts skyrocketed. Ordinary veteran rule powerhouses were no match for them at all. In the end, a rule powerhouse with 3 rule powerhouses had to step in to kill them. As he comprehended the rule of time, various mysteries of the rule of time began to appear in Gray's mind. Gray began to immerse himself in the beauty of comprehending the rule of time. The rule of time was a rule that controlled time. There were generally three types of derivations. One was time stop, one was time rewind, and one was time acceleration. For example, Gray's rule of time ability leaned toward time acceleration and produced two types of derivative abilities. One derivative ability was to increase one's movement speed and reaction speed, while the other derivative ability was to let things experience extremely long periods of time and decay. Of course, from the fact that the rule of time and the rule of space had mixed into the return to the past ability, among the derivative abilities he had, there should be a derivative ability in the direction of time rewind. As he comprehended the rule of time, he quickly discovered the derivative ability of time rewind. It was a derivative ability that allowed him to see images of the past. To put it simply, he could rewind what had happened here. Of course, this rewind was only the reproduction of images and not the flow of time. It was probably because of the fusion of this derivative ability and the rule of space that the forbidden ability of return to the past appeared. Cultivation time always passed very quickly. This was also the reason why rule powerhouses rarely appeared in the world. Unknowingly, 3 years had passed very quickly. The second rule of time was also comprehended by Gray. The time he spent on it was 1 year longer than the rule of space. This was probably because when he was comprehending the rule of space, Gray had the rule of space in the Book of Space as a reference. After comprehending the second rule of time, Gray's blood power, body, and soul had undergone another transformation. At this point, Gray's level was no worse than the old rule level. As for his true combat power, it was definitely beyond that. After all, he had 4 rule powers. In the House of Arrays, compared to 5 years ago, the head of the House of Arrays, Udo, had whiter hair and more wrinkles. As an Annihilation class elite, he had undergone such a huge change in just 5 years. One could imagine how torturous those 5 years had been for him. In those 5 years, the days of the House of Arrays had not been easy. When they discovered the rule fruit, they thought it was an opportunity for glory. They did not expect it to be the beginning of bad luck. Although Basilica of the Holy Blood did not destroy the House of Arrays because of Gray, they began to use all sorts of reasons to make things difficult for the House of Arrays. Not only did they have to hand in more offerings every year, but they also took over 3 high-quality magic mines of the House of Arrays. Not only that, but they also instigated the other 3 most powerful families to target the House of Arrays. Many of their businesses suffered heavy losses due to the suppression of the 3 most powerful families. If it were not for the House of Arrays being the most powerful family with a deep foundation, such a large family might have gone bankrupt. What made the House of Arrays even angrier was that there were a few talented children in the family who had been injured or even disabled due to various accidents. The people who had attacked them were people from the 3 most powerful families. Master, this is not good. The masters of the 3 most powerful families are here. They have also invited an elder from Basilica of the Holy Blood. At this moment, a man in a housekeeper's uniform jogged in, panting. Hearing this, the head of the House of Arrays' heart skipped a beat. He had a bad feeling. He quickly walked to the living room. Chapter 8:23. Udo, hand over the people who injured the DuPont family, and the people who injured the Sutherland family's disciples. The same goes for the Saunders family. In the House of Arrays' guest room, the atmosphere was tense. Apart from the House of Arrays, the other 3 most powerful families, the DuPont family, Sutherland family, and Saunders family, had joined forces to attack the House of Arrays. Cook, Jordan, Sylvan, don't push it too far. The injuries of the House of Arrays' disciples are worse than yours. Udo, the head of the Arrays family, suppressed his anger and said, I don't care. Hand over the people who injured the disciples of our 3 families and let us deal with them as we see fit. Cook, the head of the DuPont family, was a middle-aged man with neatly combed hair. He was trimming his nails with a nail clipper while speaking calmly. Impossible. The ones who started the fight were the disciples of your three families. I can't let you deal with the disciples of the House of Arrays. Woodou of the House of Arrays immediately denied. If he really handed over the disciples of the House of Arrays, the hearts of the people of the House of Arrays would be scattered, and the House of Arrays would not be far from falling apart. It's not up to you. Jordan, the head of the Sutherland family, was a man with a fair face and no beard. He glanced at Woodou of the Arrays family with disdain and sneered. It's not up to you. You must hand them over. Sylvan, the head of the Saunders family, was a man wearing a white suit with a noble temperament. He also sneered. The House of Arrays will never hand over the three disciples. What do you want? Udo, the patriarch of the Earthy family, took a deep breath and forcefully suppressed the anger in his heart. The disciples of the DuPont family were seriously injured this time. It might affect their training in the future. Since the House of Arrays doesn't want to hand over the injured disciples, then you must compensate. I want the House of Arrays to compensate with the gemstone vein in the Londo mountain range. The head of the DuPont family, Cook, picked up his nail clipper and looked at the head of the Aratha family, Udo. My Sutherland family is also severely injured. It is very likely that it will affect our future potential. We must compensate with the mercury veins around the Moon River. The head of the Sutherland family, Jordan, pretended to be sad about the injuries of his family's disciples. Red Spring Forest's Wind Jade Mine. Sylvan, the leader of Saunders' family, did not try to hide his request at all. Impossible. Absolutely impossible. This is robbery. The Earthy family's master, Udo, was so angry that his neck turned red, and he glared at the three people with fiery eyes. The mineral veins that the three of them asked for were all super-large mineral veins that could be mined for thousands of years. They were the foundation of the House of Arrays. If they were really handed over to the three families, the House of Arrays would lose half of its resources. This was a condition that he could not agree to no matter what. If he did, the House of Arrays would not disappear immediately, but it would definitely decline gradually. If that is the case, we will follow the usual procedure and ask Basilica of the Holy Blood to make the decision. Mr. Eunice, please make your decision. We believe in the justice of Basilica of the Holy Blood, and we will unconditionally agree to Basilica of the Holy Blood's decision. The three of them looked at Eunice, the head of Basilica of the Holy Blood, who had been silent all this time. At this moment, Eunice, the head of Basilica of the Holy Blood, cleared his throat and spoke. The four of you are the strongest families among the subordinate forces of Basilica of the Holy Blood. The loss of any one of you is the loss of Basilica of the Holy Blood. Basilica of the Holy Blood also hopes that you can resolve the conflict peacefully through negotiations. Then, I will make the decision. From today onwards, the House of Arrays will hand over the gem vein in the Londo Mountains, the mercury vein around the Moon River, and the wind jade vein in the Red Spring Forest to the DuPont family, the Sutherland family, and the Saunders family as compensation. The DuPont family, the Sutherland family, and the Saunders family are not allowed to use this as an excuse to pick a fight with the House of Arrays. Arrays City. Gray appeared with a young woman and a young boy. The young woman was the former Saintess of Light, Ingba, and the young boy was the former little boy Alan. 5 years had passed, and the little boy had grown into a young man. He had even started to practice blood spells. However, he was not very talented. After testing, he did not have the talent to practice mixed blood spells. The most suitable blood spell for him was fire. Gray let him practice the Violet Flame Beast Blood spell of the Violet Royal family. The Violet Flame Beast Blood spell belonged to the Violet Royal family, but the Origin World also had it. It was more complete, and it could be practiced to Annihilation class. Mr. Gray, compared to 5 years ago, this place is much more desolate. Walking on the streets of the city, Ingba raised her eyebrows. She could clearly feel that the city was not as prosperous as it was 5 years ago. Let's go to the House of Arrays and have a look. Gray glanced around and could indeed feel the changes before and after. He frowned imperceptibly and led Ingba and Alan to the heir of the clan in the center of the city. The reason he had appeared in Arrays City was because he was worried that the House of Arrays would be affected because of him. According to common sense, he was the one who had taken the law fruit, and it had nothing to do with the House of Arrays. However, Basilica of the Holy Blood might be angry at the House of Arrays for not being able to get the law fruit. At the time, he had not thought it through. However, with a law fruit in front of him, and this law fruit belonged to Basilica of the Holy Blood, who was a robber, he could not help but be tempted. The three of them came to the House of Arrays. The guard at the door knew Gray, so he did not dare to neglect him. He immediately invited Gray into the House of Arrays. Soon, a young man with his right foot wrapped like a dumpling and a walking stick came. When he saw Gray, his face was filled with excitement and sadness. There were tears in his eyes. "Sir Gray, please save the House of Arrays." The young man was the third son of the Arrays family, Fernando. Although the other party was not high-spirited at the beginning, he was definitely energetic and good-looking. However, now he was injured and his face was full of stubble. He was almost unrecognizable. Sure enough, seeing the other party like this, Gray confirmed his previous judgment. The House of Arrays was in trouble. "Elder Eunice, your judgment, the House of Arrays can't accept it." Hearing the fair judgment of Basilica of the Holy Blood, Udo, the head of the Arrays family, was so angry that he could not speak. After a while, he gritted his teeth and said, "Udo, you are too ignorant. How dare you question the judgment of Basilica of the Holy Blood?" Before the head of Basilica of the Holy Blood, Jordan, the head of the Sutherland family, had already scolded him. "The judgment of Basilica of the Holy Blood is an order. How dare you disobey the orders of Basilica of the Holy Blood? Are you trying to betray Basilica of the Holy Blood? Jordan, don't slander me." Hearing the bizarre logic of the head of the Sutherland family, Udo, the head of the Arrays family, was so angry that his face turned red. "I think it's possible. More than 100 years ago, didn't the House of Arrays have Nurden who dared to kill an elder of Basilica of the Holy Blood? It's not impossible for another person to betray Basilica of the Holy Blood to appear more than 100 years later. Maybe the whole family has a problem." Cook, the head of the DuPont family, sneered. "Jordan Cook, slandering the House of Arrays. You will die a horrible death." Udo, the head of the Arrays family, was so angry that his heart ached. "Udo, accept your fate. The judgment of Basilica of the Holy Blood is final. No one can stop it." Sylvan, the head of the Saunders family, adjusted his noble attire and chuckled. "Really?" A voice came. Gray stepped into the guest room with Fernando leading the way. He looked at the man who was dressed like a noble but did not look like one at all with a smile. "Who are you, mister? It's not a good decision to stand up for the House of Arrays." Sylvan raised an eyebrow when he saw Gray. He felt that the man looked familiar, but he could not recall where he had seen him before. However, he was sure that this man was not from the House of Arrays. The House of Arrays did not betray Basilica of the Holy Blood? Then who is he? Although he was surprised by Gray's appearance, Jordan, the head of the Sutherland family, was not afraid since the tycoon of Basilica of the Holy Blood was here. He rolled his eyes and had an idea. He must be someone who colluded with the House of Arrays. Cook, the head of the DuPont family, quickly agreed and respectfully spoke to the tycoon of Basilica of the Holy Blood, Eunice, who was not far away. "Mr. Eunice, there must be something wrong with this man. I suggest we capture him and interrogate him carefully." Hearing Jordan's words, the head of the DuPont family, Cook, and the head of the Saunders family, both looked at the tycoon of Basilica of the Holy Blood, Eunice. They thought, judging from Basilica of the Holy Blood's attitude toward the House of Arrays, the House of Arrays might be in trouble again this time. "Huh? However, they could not help but look puzzled when they saw Eunice, the tycoon of Basilica of the Holy Blood, who was still majestic just a moment ago, now looked pale and his forehead was full of sweat. "Mr. Eunice, are you not feeling well?" Jordan, the head of the Sutherland family, quickly asked with concern. "I think there is something wrong with this sentence. What do you think?" Gray looked at the tycoon of Basilica of the Holy Blood, Eunice, with a faint coldness in his eyes. "Your Excellency is right." Eunice, the tycoon of Basilica of the Holy Blood, forced a smile on his face and said with a trembling voice. He was one of the tycoons who accompanied Gray on the last trip to snatch the law fruit. Naturally, he had seen Gray and the battle between Gray and Saint Rudolph. Although Gray escaped in the end, the combat power of a veteran saint was undoubtedly revealed. Facing Gray, he could not even escape. At this time, he had the urge to slap himself. The reason why he dared to come to the House of Arrays was because Gray had not appeared for 5 years. It seemed that he had nothing to do with the House of Arrays. He did not expect to encounter Gray as soon as he arrived. "I think the children of these 3 families injured the children of the House of Arrays, and they should compensate." Gray continued. Yes, they should compensate." Eunice, the tycoon of Basilica of the Holy Blood, nodded like a chicken pecking rice. He did not dare to say a word. Regardless of how Basilica of the Holy Blood would deal with the appearance of Gray, the most important task now was to stay alive. Chapter 8:24. "Mr. Eunice, shut up. All you need to do is listen." The leader of the DuPont family, Cook, and the leader of the Sutherland family, Jordan, sensed that something was wrong. They had already guessed that Gray's identity was not simple. They wanted to plead with the tycoon of Basilica of the Holy Blood, Eunice, but they were interrupted by him. For the loss of the House of Arrays, the Sutherland family, the DuPont family, and the Saunders family will each compensate the House of Arrays with a large load. "Mr. What do you think?" The tycoon of Basilica of the Holy Blood, Eunice, was sweating profusely. Sweat was dripping down his neck as he asked. "That's fine." Gray nodded slightly. He could naturally guess what Eunice was thinking, but he did not care. 5 years had passed, and his power level was no weaker than a veteran law fighter. He was no longer afraid of the saint of Basilica of the Holy Blood. Could it be him? Seeing the tycoon of Basilica of the Holy Blood, Eunice's courteous and even fearful attitude towards Gray, a memory after several years finally surfaced in the head of the Saunders family, Sylvan. More than 5 years ago, Basilica of the Holy Blood had issued an order to her subordinates not to provoke a black-haired young man. After so many years, he could not remember the face in the painting that was not very clear. However, corresponding to the attitude of the tycoon of Basilica of the Holy Blood, Sylvan could not help but guess the identity of the young man. The large load as compensation must be handed over to the House of Arrays within a week. Do the 3 families have any objections? Gray looked at the leaders of the Saunders family, the DuPont family, and the Sutherland family. His gaze was calm, but coupled with the attitude of the tycoon of Basilica of the Holy Blood, Eunice's attitude towards Gray, the 3 of them suddenly felt unimaginable pressure. Mr. The Saunders family has no objections. Even for the strongest families, losing a large load was enough to affect their foundation. The Sutherland family and the DuPont family wanted to negotiate, but the leader of the Saunders family, Sylvan, had already agreed. Seeing that Sylvan agreed without hesitation, Cook and Jordan guessed that Sylvan knew something. The safest way was to make the same choice as Sylvan, so they had no choice but to agree. The Sutherland family has no objections. The DuPont family has no objections. After the 3 families agreed, they immediately left the House of Arrays with the excuse that they needed to prepare the large load as soon as possible. As Your Excellency, now that the matter has been resolved, I shall take my leave. Gray. Of course Gray did not say Eunice stood, Gray did not graze. He immediately, his slightly trembling body. When he reached the door, Angor still did not say anything. Eunice let out a sigh of relief. Judging from Angor's attitude, his life was saved. However, just as he let out a sigh of relief, Gray's voice suddenly sounded behind him. There is a forest 300 miles east of Array's city. I will wait there for 10 days. After 10 days, I will not wait for you. Understood. I will definitely pass on the message. Eunice, the tycoon of Basilica of the Holy Blood, was almost scared to death. He held his wildly beating heart and quickly said, after carefully confirming that Gray had finished speaking, he trembled and walked out. He would never come to the house of Arrays again. Even if he was not killed, he would be scared to death. Mr. Gray, thank you for your help. Looking at Gray, Udo, the head of the house of Arrays, was full of gratitude. Under the threat of the three most powerful families, coupled with Basilica of the Holy Blood, he was likely to be forced to hand over the 3 super-load. If this happened, the House of Arrays would lose half of its heritage, and would inevitably decline. Fortunately, Gray's appearance not only prevented the House of Arrays from losing the 3 super-loads, but also allowed the House of Arrays to receive compensation for the 3 large loads. It was not a loss but a profit. Don't thank me. The reason why the House of Arrays was targeted was because of me. Gray shook his head slightly. Although he did not know the specific situation of the House of Arrays, from today's situation, he could roughly guess that they were targeted under the instigation of Basilica of the Holy Blood. It must be because of him that they were targeted. Moreover, if I stood up for the House of Arrays, it might not be a good thing for the House of Arrays. After all, in this case, the House of Arrays would be completely on the opposite side of Basilica of the Holy Blood. Mr. Gray, you don't have to do this. The reason why the House of Arrays was targeted by Basilica of the Holy Blood was because of a historical problem. It had nothing to do with Mr. Gray. Even if Mr. Gray did not appear, the House of Arrays would not last long. Udo, the head of the House of Arrays, shook his head with gratitude. At least the appearance of Mr. Gray solved the urgent problem of the House of Arrays. Even if it were to be destroyed, it would be the fault of the House of Arrays. Don't worry, it won't be destroyed. Gray smiled and walked out of the meeting room. He looked into the distance. Now it was up to Basilica of the Holy Blood to decide. The heads of the DuPont family, Sutherland family, and Saunders family left the House of Arrays on the Rune ship as fast as they could. After flying for more than 100 miles, Cook and Jordan landed on the Rune ship of Saunders family. On the deck, Sylvan, the head of Saunders family, had already guessed that they would come and was already waiting for them. Sylvan, what's going on? Who's that person? Why did you and Mr. Eunice suddenly change your mind? Cook asked anxiously. Jordan, the head of Sutherland House, also looked at Sylvan. You still don't know? Sylvan sighed. Know what? Jordan and Cook both looked at Sylvan in confusion. They did not understand what he meant. 5 years ago, didn't you see Basilica of the Holy Blood's announcement? Sylvan rubbed his temples and asked. 5 years ago, Basilica of the Holy Blood's announcement? The patriarch of the Sutherland family, Jordan, and the patriarch of the DuPont family, Cook, were stunned at first. Then, their pupils contracted abruptly, and their eyes were filled with horror. Of course, they had seen the content of the notice 5 years ago. However, the drawing was too abstract, and it was 5 years ago, so they did not remember it immediately. Now that Sylvan reminded them, they all remembered it. Lingering fear. Uncontrollable lingering fear. They actually met with such a big shot, not long ago, and it was not a friendly encounter. Thinking of these two people, they could not help but be terrified. Sweat dripped down their backs. That was an existence comparable to the level of laws. Such an existence could wipe out their family with a wave of his hand. Even if their families were the strongest families, they would not be able to resist. The House of Arrays is connected to such a big shot. Is the House of Arrays going to turn the tables? The patriarch of the Sutherland family, Jordan, said in bewilderment. The three families were looking for trouble with the House of Arrays because some big shots of Basilica of the Holy Blood asked them to do so. Now, it seemed that the House of Arrays was not easy to mess with. They actually had such a big shot behind their back. It's hard to say. The key is to see Basilica of the Holy Blood's attitude. Family leader Sylvan paused for a moment and spoke in a serious tone. But one thing is for sure. Both sides are giants. Do not get involved with them. Otherwise, one careless mistake and you will be smashed to pieces. The patriarchs of the three strongest families, who had already made up their minds, separated with solemn expressions. They quickly returned to their families and immediately stopped targeting the Arrays family. They immediately handed over the large mineral load as compensation to the Arrays family. 10 days later, in a forest 300 kilometers east of Arrays City. The setting sun was like blood as it dyed the sky red, giving it a mournful appearance. Gray calmly looked at the approaching dusk. Beside him, Shadow 8 and Alan were accompanying him. Looks like he's not coming. Gray withdrew his gaze and teleported back to the House of Arrays with Shadow 8 and Alan. 10 days had passed, but Saint Rudolph of Basilica of the Holy Blood did not show up. Considering the speed of a law-level master, there was no way he could not make it in time. The only reason was that he was not coming. Basilica of the Holy Blood's attitude was already reflected in this. Main Palace of Basilica of the Holy Blood. Why didn't Mr. Rudolph go? Palace Master Silerman frowned. He did not dare to question Saint Rudolph's decision, but he could not figure it out. Saint Rudolph obviously wanted to kill the other party. Silerman could clearly feel the killing intent. Why did Saint Rudolph not plan to go after the other party appeared? Because Saint Rudolph wants to reconcile with the other party. He wants to show his conciliatory attitude through this. Vice Palace Master Lizard said helplessly as she looked at her stubborn husband. Reconcile? Why? Palace Master Silerman looked at Deputy Palace Master Lizard in confusion. Because it's not good for Basilica of the Holy Blood to be enemies with the other party. The other party appeared 5 years after obtaining the law fruit. It's very likely that he has already achieved the law fruit. Deputy Palace Master Lizard explained. How can it be so easy to break through? What if that guy didn't break through the law fruit? Palace Master Silerman somewhat agreed, but he still retorted. Even if he didn't achieve the law fruit, the other party is alone and has no influence. He can leave if he wants to. On the other hand, Basilica of the Holy Blood has a huge influence that needs to be taken into consideration. It's not good for Basilica of the Holy Blood to be enemies with the other party. Deputy Palace Master Lizard looked at her childish husband in amusement. What about the House of Arrays? Palace Master Silerman frowned. All right, I know you're secretly letting the disciples of Basilica of the Holy Blood trip up the House of Arrays. Make them stop. Deputy Palace Master Lizard patted her husband's shoulder and said, since the other party is willing to stand up for the House of Arrays, it means that the House of Arrays has some status in the other party's heart. Since Saint Rudolph wants to reconcile with the other party, he naturally can't do anything to the House of Arrays. Chapter 825. After staying in the House of Arrays for a while, Gray left the House of Arrays with Ingba and Alan. They went to investigate places where there might be precious magic herbs that could be used to comprehend rules. Unfortunately, they did not find anything. Precious magic herbs that could help in comprehending rules were too precious. Even in the source world, which had a high yield of magic herbs, the chances of them being produced were not high. This was also the reason why there were so few low-ranked powerhouses. A few months later, he appeared in the northern region of the source world. This was the region near the Endless Sea Realm. The chaotic territory, where he had lived for a long time, belonged to the northern region. The Endless Sea Realm was a vast sea that extended to an unknown width. There were few people there, and even low-ranked powerhouses had never reached its depth. This was because there were many powerful blood beasts in the depths of the endless sea realm. There were also many low-ranked blood beasts. Some of them even had several types of rules, and their combat powers surpassed veteran low-ranked powerhouses. Even a veteran rule-level powerhouse might die if they were not careful. In history, many veteran low-ranked powerhouses who did not have much time left resolutely stepped into the depths of the endless sea realm in order to find precious magic herbs that could prolong their lives or raise their realm. In the end, they never returned. It was unknown whether they died in the depths of the endless sea realm due to the exhaustion of their lifespan or were buried in the mouths of low-ranked blood beasts. In short, even low-ranked powerhouses would pale at the mention of the dangers in the depths of the endless sea realm. The sky was dark, and it was about to rain. From time to time, huge white lightning could be seen. 100-meter-long commercial rune ships sailed in this gloomy weather. On the deck of the rune ship, Gray held the side of the ship with both hands and looked into the distance. The wind whistled, blowing his black hair and revealing his well-defined face. His blue eyes were as deep as the sky, and he exuded a mysterious aura. Driven by this mysterious aura, the other passengers on the deck could not help but distance themselves from him. Although Gray had restrained the low-ranked aura in his body, and not a trace of it leaked out, the instinct of living creatures to seek good fortune and avoid harm made these people keep a distance from Gray. On Gray's left, Alan also held onto the side of the ship and tried his best to look into the distance, as if he wanted to try his best to see the world in Gray's eyes. After witnessing the majestic sight of Gray achieving the laws, his heart was filled with admiration for Gray, and he could not help but imitate Gray. Unfortunately, he did not know that the world in his eyes was destined to be different from the world in Gray's eyes. As a rule-level expert, Gray could easily see dozens of kilometers away without any obstruction. This was something he could not do when he had just started cultivating. On the right side of Gray was the perfect and beautiful Ingba. The wind blew her long blonde hair, leaving a beautiful back view for the others on the deck. He should be a disciple of some top family. I don't think so. It's not that I haven't seen the disciples of the top clans, but none of them can compare to him in terms of temperament. Which force do you think he's from? It's either a supreme family or a saint-level force. Looking at the three of them, especially Gray, who had a mysterious temperament among the three of them, some people on the deck whispered, "Sister Amy, what do you think his identity is?" Two young women dressed in high-grade clothes and with outstanding looks were also looking at Gray. The black-haired woman asked the woman beside her curiously. "It's hard to say, but his identity is definitely not low." The woman beside the black-haired woman was a brown-haired woman. She was slightly older than the black-haired woman by 1 or 2 years and looked calmer. She shook her head slightly. The two of them came from a top family. This time, they had followed the elders of the family out to visit an elder of a saint-level force to broaden their horizons. At this moment, a sharp chirp suddenly sounded in the sky. It was extremely ear-piercing, like a needle stabbing over. Many people on the deck could not help but cover their ears. Some people's ears even bled, and some even fainted. A space shield was in front of Alan, blocking the impact of the sound wave. Gray looked in the direction of the sound. In that direction, a giant bird with a wingspan of 80 feet was seen. It was almost as long as the rune ship. It was flying through the thunderclouds. It was flying quickly. The giant bird's body was green and gray. It did not have any feathers. The thunder and lightning in the thunderclouds hit its body, but it was not damaged. It was excited. It was like a fish in water. Thundercloud bird. Gray recognized the blood beast. He had seen it before. It was a disaster-class blood beast that had a 4-element blood pulse. Its power was far greater than an annihilation-class elite. The blood beast liked thunderstorms. It could create thunderstorms. Wherever it appeared, it was accompanied by thunderclouds. Because of that, it was called the thundercloud bird. So. Hearing the scream, 5 shadows jumped onto the deck. There were men and women. Judging by the presence that came out of them as they ran, they were all Annihilation class elite. Among them, there were elites who were in charge of the rune ship. There were also guests on the rune ship. One of the middle-aged women came next to the two young women. "It is the thundercloud bird." The five of them looked solemn as they watched the approaching thundercloud bird. The thundercloud bird was a top calamity-grade blood beast. It was one of the most powerful calamity-grade blood beasts. Only some calamity-grade blood beasts that had consumed precious demonic herbs and undergone a metamorphosis could surpass it in terms of combat power. "This is bad." A middle-aged man, who looked like he was the elite in charge of the rune ship, looked gloomy. He turned around and looked at the other four. "The four of you, with my power, fighting the thundercloud bird is too much for me. Please help me. After this, the Haruman Chamber of Commerce will prepare a gift for you." "No problem." The four of them thought for a while and agreed. The gift from the Haruman Chamber of Commerce was not the most important thing. The most important thing was the Haruman Chamber of Commerce's favor. The Haruman Chamber of Commerce was a super faction that was no weaker than the strongest families. They had business in many areas. If they could build a relationship with such a Chamber of Commerce, it would be very beneficial for their family's business. So, the five of them quickly rushed out of the rune ship. The rune ship's defense shield was raised. Although it could not block the thundercloud bird's attack, it was enough to block the thundercloud bird's sound wave. Rumble, rumble, rumble. Under the rolling thunderclouds, a fierce battle broke out. The light of the blood beast's ability covered the light of the lightning in the thunderclouds. There were even attacks that pierced through the thunderclouds, allowing the sunlight to shine through. On the deck, everyone was nervously watching the battle. This battle could very well decide their fate. If the five of them were defeated, the outcome of the rune ship and even the people on the ship could be imagined. Not good. A cry of surprise suddenly sounded from the five people who were fighting. A thick gray lightning broke through the blockade of the five people and headed straight for the rune ship. Crackle! The surging thunder and lightning let out a sound like a landslide or a tsunami. With a terrifying destructive power, it hit the defensive shield of the rune ship. The defensive shield immediately shattered with a cracking sound. Seeing the gray lightning sweeping towards the deck was in a panic. Some wanted to hide in the cabin, some wanted to jump off the ship. Unfortunately, it was too late. Everyone's faces were filled with despair. They, who were left on the rune ship, naturally had not reached the annihilation grade. Facing such an attack, it was very likely that they would, humph. At this time, Ingba took a step forward. Her cold face looked indifferent. She coldly grunted. A giant light shield appeared. It blocked the surging gray lightning. Pung! The surging gray lightning hit the light shield. It only created a small ripple before it dissipated. Behind the light shield, the rune ship and the people on the deck were not harmed. She blocked the mixed power of the thundercloud bird. What kind of power is this white gold shield? Such strong power. It is at least the annihilation grade. She's actually the strongest of the three? On the deck, the people who had survived the disaster were breathing heavily. They wiped the cold sweat off their foreheads in disgust. They originally thought that the strongest of the three would be Gray, the young man with a mysterious temperament. After all, Gray's temperament was very unique. It was full of mystery. From what they saw, mystery was often related to power. They did not expect that the strongest of the three was this extremely beautiful woman. She was at least the annihilation grade. Did we make a mistake? The black-haired young woman blinked her eyes. Her face was full of confusion. Did we really make a mistake? The brown-haired young woman frowned. Although Gray did not make a move at this time, under normal circumstances, shouldn't a man show his gentlemanly demeanor and step forward? If he did not step forward, it was very likely that he did not have the power. Chirp, chirp. With compassion, the injured thundercloud bird retreated. The 5 annihilation grade elites returned to the rune ship. They were all looking for Ingba, who had saved the people on the ruined ship. The 5 of them were very grateful to Ingba, who had saved the ruined ship. If it were not for her, their juniors and passengers would have been injured or even killed. To their surprise, after searching the entire ruined ship, they could not find Ingba. The young man and the young man with her had also disappeared. If they were not sure that the 3 of them had appeared on the ruined ship, they would have thought that the 3 of them had never appeared. Dead? In the forest dozens of miles away from the ruined ship, Gray's face was full of shock and anger. The reason why he had suddenly brought Ingba and Alan away from the ruined ship was not because Ingba had suddenly displayed a strong power and become the focus of attention. He had left decisively to avoid any future trouble. It was because at that moment one of his subordinates, a subordinate who had followed him from the original time and space, had died. Chapter 8:26. Through the open dimension, Gray brought a total of 9 people to this time and space. The former light saint, Ing 8, was kept by his side. The other 8 were sent to different parts of the origin world to look for information about precious magic herbs. The reason he came here on a rune ship was because one of them had reported that there was already news about precious magic herbs that could be used to learn rules. And just now, the person who had reported to him had died. To be able to kill Ing 11 without even asking me for help, the person who did it must be at least a 4th or 5th level annihilation class. It might even be an annihilation giant. Gray's mind raced. Ing 11, who had been killed, used to be a core disciple of the Sacred Eye race. His position in the Sacred Eye race was similar to the former Light Saint, Ing 8. His power was beyond the average annihilation class. To be able to make him unable to ask for help, his power must be at least a 4th or 5th level annihilation class. It might even be an annihilation giant. When he was killed, it should be in this direction. Let's go there first. Letting Ing 8 and Alan return to the dimension, Gray teleported in the direction where he had been killed. 2 days later, after some investigation, Gray appeared at the edge of a forest. From the information he got from a city hundreds of miles away, there was a huge commotion 2 days ago, but it quickly calmed down. If he was not wrong, Ing 11 should have been killed nearby. Flying in the air, Gray quickly searched above the forest. After half an hour, Gray found traces of a battle beside a river. By the river, the lush plants were destroyed. The ground had collapsed and was full of rippling cracks. In the center, there was a giant pit that was a few miles wide. The giant pit was hundreds of feet deep. In the center, there was a body that did not look like a human. Gray landed in the giant pit and looked at the body that did not look like a human. The body's bones were shattered and the skin was cracked. The face could not be seen clearly, but judging from the body, it should be Ing 11. 1 hit to kill. It must be a giant-level attack. Gray's eyes were cold. There was only one trace of battle at the scene. From this, it wasn't hard to see that the other party had killed Shadow 11 in a single blow. To be able to do this, the other party was definitely a big shot. The reason why he was certain that it was a powerhouse and not a law powerhouse was because if a law powerhouse had attacked, Shadow 11's corpse would have definitely been smashed to pieces. Thus, it could only be a powerhouse and not a law powerhouse. The price for killing my men is very high. Gray's voice was cold. After being dead for so long, all the bones in his body were shattered, including his head. Naturally, there was no way for him to be resurrected. I'd like to see who it is. The time precepts shrouded the surrounding space, and strange changes occurred. The wild beasts that came to the river not long ago to drink water, and the birds that flew across the sky not long ago all reappeared. However, their movements were very strange. They were actually moving backwards. Not only were the beasts drinking by the river and the birds flying in the sky, but even the water in the river was flowing backwards. In the nearby area, all the scenes were retreating. This was Gray's newly developed time precepts derivative ability, Backtrack. It could turn back time and see what had happened in the past. The scene quickly rewound to 2 days ago. The huge pit disappeared, the dense forest was restored, and two people appeared in the sky. One of them was Shadow 11, and the other was a very burly old man with a white beard. Gray stopped the time rewind and let time flow at normal speed. The entire battle process was replayed again. When Shadow 11 and the others passed by the river, the burly old man appeared, clearly coming for Shadow 11. Sensing the terrifying strength of the burly old man, Shadow 11's face changed and he retreated. The burly old man punched out and the air shook violently, creating a violent shockwave. This terrifying blow caused the space to shake violently, as if it was about to be torn apart. Shadow 11 was hit on the spot and heavily smashed into the riverside forest, leaving a terrifying pit in the forest. Before he even landed on the ground, he was already dead. He was killed by absolute combat strength without any ability to resist. This old man's realm was no doubt at the giant level. Only the strongest families and sacred factions have giant-level figures. There aren't many of these factions, and if you lock down the nearby area, the range will be even smaller. Gray's face was cold. He had basically confirmed the suspicious factions, which were the factions with annihilation giants in the nearby area. With the rarity of giant-level figures, there were no more than 5 such factions. There's a simpler way. Gray's eyes were cold. He used his puppet ability to contact one of the shadow guards in the source world and took control of his body. Then, the shadow guard's glabella twisted and split open, revealing a golden vertical eye. His identity was once one of the Sacred Eye Clan's giant. In terms of searching ability, the Sacred Eye Clan's rule of eyes was naturally the best. As long as he knew the other person's appearance, he could find the other person through this eye. Even if the other person was tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of miles away, it would be difficult to escape the tracking of this eye. Schwa. In the golden vertical eye, images flashed one after another. Finally, the images stopped flashing, and a single image was projected onto the golden vertical eye, no longer changing. In a classical room, there was a big old man standing with his hands behind his back. He was more than 6 feet tall, and his muscles were like dragons wrapped around his body. It made him look very strong. His white beard looked very impressive. It was very thick and shaped like a crescent moon. This person was the one he saw in the flashback. It was the person who killed Shadow 11. Over here. His consciousness returned to his body. Gray looked in a direction and quickly teleported there. No matter who it was, the person who killed him had to pay the price. If he was lucky, he might get something extra. Shadow 11 had been killed while searching for precious magic power medicine. Gray could not help but suspect that Shadow 11 had found something and alerted some faction. That was why he was killed. Several hours later, Gray appeared in a huge city that seemed to have existed for a long time. Coming to the place in his memories, Gray saw a huge building complex that occupied several hundred square miles. The huge building complex was built in a very imposing manner. The walls were tall and the towers were tall. The buildings were connected. The style leaned towards retro and the colors were relatively heavy. It was less bright and more classical, appearing more solemn. "Sir, who are you? Why have you come to the Earth Holy Hall?" Gray's appearance immediately alerted the people who were in charge of the daily guards of the huge building complex. 4 blood warriors wearing the same khaki-colored combat armor immediately appeared. The auras of the 4 of them were steady and strong. Their strength was at least at the magic light warrior level. On their chests there was a mark of a ripple. It didn't look like water ripples, but more like the air ripples caused by the burly old man's punch. Seeing Gray's attire and aura, the 4 of them were rather polite. However, there was clearly some arrogance in their words. They were proud to be a member of this faction. Earth Holy Hall? Saint Class faction. That's right. Whether it is a powerful family or a Saint Class faction, it is possible. Gray was stunned. Then, he realized what was going on. It was possible for a faction to have an annihilation grade giant, whether it was a powerful family or a saint-class faction. Relatively speaking, a saint-class faction was more likely. After all, a saint-class faction's intelligence network was stronger. They were most likely to get information related to precious magic herbs that could be used to understand rules. "Sir, why have you come to the Earth Holy Hall?" The four of them had already sensed that something was off. They had already raised their guard against Gray. If something was wrong, they would not hesitate to attack and capture Gray. "I am here to find someone. What is the name of the person you are looking for?" "I don't know, but I know that he is inside." Gray shook his head. He really did not know the person's name. "You are here to cause trouble, right?" They were looking for someone, but they did not know the name of the person they were looking for. The leader of the four looked angry. He secretly made a hand gesture to inform the people in the distance that there was a situation. He led the other three toward Gray. Two of them went behind Gray. The other two attacked Gray from the front to distract Gray. Gray looked cold. He waved his left hand. It was like he was swatting a fly, but it created an unimaginable storm. The raging wind lifted the stone slabs on the ground. The trees that were used for ornamental purposes were uprooted. The air was extremely compressed, forming a white wind pressure. It hit the four of them. Puff! The white wind pressure hit the four of them like a real wall. The four of them immediately spat out blood and flew backward. Catcha! The bones in their chests cracked. At least half of their ribs were broken. They fell to the ground and could not get up for a long time. Gray did not care about the four of them. He walked straight inside. He walked toward the tower that the Eye of the Rule had seen. "Someone is invading. Ring the alarm." The reaction of a saint-ranked organization was naturally extremely fast. The alarm bells within the building continued to ring, and a large number of people charged towards Gray. In less than a minute they blocked Gray's path. Gray's response to this was to wave his palm again. The wind was howling. The stone slabs and trees flew. The people who blocked Gray's path were like the four people. They all spat out blood and flew backward. Following the already dilapidated road, Gray continued to move forward, heading towards the loft. Along the way, people tried to stop him. Gray waved his hand and sent them flying. Gray was in a place where no one could stop him. No one could stop him. Not even Annihilation class beings could. His level had reached the old Rule class level. Even his body power had reached a very scary level. This was just a small test. He did not even use 10% of his power. Chapter 8:27. Ding, ding, ding. The ear-piercing alarm kept ringing in the Earth Holy Temple. Inside the Earth Holy Temple, many elites were alarmed. They all jumped up high and headed for the battle. However, even though one expert after another rushed over, they were still unable to stop Gray's footstep. Gray continued to head toward the building he had discovered using the laws of eyes without any obstructions. Along the way, he encountered many injured experts from the Earth Saint Hall. What is going on? In an elder's yard in the Earth Holy Temple, an elder was receiving guests. Her guests were a middle-aged woman and two young women. When she heard the alarm, she excused herself and rushed towards the direction of the battle. The middle-aged woman and two young women who were guests at her place hesitated for a moment before following her. After running for a while, they saw a broken and messy palace. There were many injured elites from the Earth Holy Temple lying on the ground. How is this possible? The middle-aged woman and the two young women were shocked. The Earth Holy Temple was a saint-class faction. They had many Annihilation-class elites, yet someone dared to barge in and injure all of them. It was unbelievable to them. Is it an attack from another temple? The middle-aged woman looked serious. If it was another saint-class faction attacking, it was possible. The three of them followed the sounds of the battle and finally saw the attacker. However, what surprised them was that it wasn't a group of experts. Instead, it was only one person. However, it was this person who seemed to be invincible in the Earth Holy Temple. With a wave of his hand, Many elites from the Earth Holy Temple were injured and sent flying. There were many Annihilation class elites among them. There were even some who were not normal Annihilation class elite. Without exception, they were all injured and sent flying with a wave of his hand. It's him. The three of them looked at the person. Suddenly, the black-haired young woman cried out. Her eyes were filled with shock. The brown-haired young woman was like her. Her eyes were filled with disbelief. Do you know this person? Seeing their reactions, the middle-aged woman looked at them with confusion. Elder, do you remember the three people who disappeared on the rune ship? Are you saying that he is the young man who disappeared? The middle-aged woman immediately understood what the two of them meant. Yes, it is him. The black-haired young woman and brown-haired young woman nodded in shock. They were all wrong. At that time, everyone on the runic ship, including them, was wrong. The strongest of the three was not that young woman, but this young man. Although the young woman had blocked the thundercloud bird's attack and displayed her powerful strength, she paled in comparison to the young man in front of her. Why did he barge into the Earth Holy Hall? The two of them were puzzled. Why did the other party want to barge into the Earth Saint Hall? Although the other party was powerful, they still did not believe that the other party would be able to gain an advantage over them. They would definitely be defeated and captured in the end. The Earth Sacred Hall had many big shots and experts. They even had experts who were at the level of laws. How could they be a match for the Earth Sacred Hall? You're courting death. How dare you barge into my Earth Holy Hall? With a loud shout, a tall and sturdy old man with a conspicuous white beard appeared like a cannonball. Under the impact of his landing, the ground that was paved with stone slabs shattered one after another, and then sputtered in all directions like bullets. It's one of the heads of the Earth Holy Temple, Elder Simon. The three of them immediately recognized the old man's identity. How dare you barge into my Earth Holy Hall and injure the people of my Earth Holy Hall? Seeing the injured disciples and elders of the Earth Holy Hall, the tall and sturdy old man glared furiously. Earlier, he had been cultivating. Although he had heard the alarm, he had not planned on paying it any attention because he had been cultivating. There were many experts in the Earth Holy Hall, and it would not be a problem for them to capture the enemy. However, he had not expected that not only had the enemy not been captured, but they had also gotten closer and closer to his residence. He could only give up on cultivating and rush over. You came out on your own? That's good too. I don't have to look for you, Gray said calmly as he looked at the tall and sturdy old man, Simon. Looking for me? The tall and sturdy old man, Simon, was stunned. He could not help but carefully assess Gray, but he did not have any impression of him. Although Gray had some reputation among the saint-level organizations, it was only in the regions near the Sun Saint Hall and Basilica of the Holy Blood. He had only heard of the Earth Holy Hall in the far north, and did not have any detailed information about him. Why are you looking for me? He asked as he looked at Gray, puzzled. 2 days ago you killed someone. That person was my subordinate. He was just a subordinate. The one who was really looking for information was you? The tall and sturdy old man, Simon, was surprised, and killing intent flashed in his eyes. After discovering that someone was looking for information about the magic herbs of laws, and had already found out some information that the Earth Holy Hall had tried their best to conceal, the Earth Holy Hall had immediately decided to take action and kill the person. In order to ensure that nothing went wrong, he had even taken action personally. However, he had not expected that with the other party's strength. He was just a subordinate who was looking for information. The one who was really looking for information was someone else. That's right, it's me. How are you going to die after killing one of my people? When he said die, Gray's gaze turned cold. He had not brought many subordinates with him to this space-time dimension to begin with, and now one of them had been killed. This made him very furious and frustrated. Die. You're the one who should die. The tall and sturdy old man, Simon, flew into a rage when Gray asked him how he was going to die despite being a big shot. Killing intent gushed out from his body, and he suddenly exploded forth, smashing out a punch toward Gray. Visible and terrifying tremors extended out from his fist, and the space trembled intensely like a piece of cloth. Terrifying tremors struck out toward Gray. The law of tremors was one of the laws that the Earth Holy Hall had grasped. It allowed one's attacks to be imbued with terrifying tremors, possessing extremely great destructive prowess. In terms of destructive prowess, it was ranked at the very top amongst the laws. When it was displayed by a big shot like him, its prowess was extremely great. In the past, he had once used the law of tremors to shatter his enemies along with their indestructible gold weapons. Boom! Faced with the visible and terrifying tremors, Gray's expression did not change. However, his gaze turned even colder, and he also smashed out a punch toward his opponent. There were no terrifying tremors, but there was an extremely pure destructive prowess. The air exploded, and strong gales spread out in all directions. It was as if a strong gale had passed through, blowing away the buildings and revealing a large empty space. In front of Gray's fist, the air was compressed under the extreme pressure, turning into a solid white wall. Pang! The terrifying tremors that could even shatter gold weapons hit the white wall that was made of gas, but there was only a muffled sound. The white wall shook slightly before continuing forward. The expression of the big old man, Simon, suddenly changed. He quickly dodged, but the white wall was too fast. Before he could dodge, it had already hit his body. Catcha! His body was like it had been hit by a giant hammer that had been transformed into a mountain. He slid back heavily. On his body there was the sound of bones cracking. Inside his body, his organs were full of cracks. They were like broken porcelain that had been forcefully glued back together. Some of them were even pierced by broken bones. 1,000 meters. He slid for 1,000 meters before he hit the ground hard. After he hit the ground, he spat out a mouthful of blood. There were pieces of his organs in it. Simon. Elder? Around them, seeing the annihilation-level big shots arrive, the Earth Holy Hall disciples and even the elders let out a sigh of relief. They were all stunned. Seeing the annihilation-level big shots arrive, they were relieved. From what they could see, no matter how strong the enemy was, he would not be able to defeat an annihilation-level big shot. Reality had given them a big surprise. To be more accurate, it was more of a surprise than a happy one. The powerful annihilation-level big shots could not even block one punch. They could not help but wonder if there was a fake big shot among the big shots of the Holy Hall. What rule power did he use? How can it be so strong? Even a big shot who has mastered the rules of Shake is no match for him? The black-haired young woman and the brown-haired young woman looked at the middle-aged woman in shock. The middle-aged woman was silent for a while. She then spoke with a shocked expression. If I am not mistaken, he only used physical power. He might be, because she was too shocked, she could not speak clearly. For an annihilation-level elite who had lived for 1,000 years and was used to seeing strong winds and heavy rain, it was unbelievable. Pat, pat, pat. The disciples and elders of the Earth Holy Hall were stunned from the shock, but Gray wasn't. He stepped on the broken ground and walked up to the burly old man, Simon. You are. The big old man, Simon, looked at Gray in shock. He had already guessed Gray's identity. He could not stop the fear from spreading in his heart. He had never thought that killing a person who was spying on precious magic power herbs would attract such a terrifying existence. It seems like your choice is to be stomped to death. Gray looked at the big old man, Simon, with a cold expression. Don't kill me, Gray raised his foot. He did not care about the big old man, Simon, begging for mercy. He stepped on the big old man's head. Stop! A few loud shouts were heard. A few figures rushed over from all directions. The air was filled with the sharp sound of friction between their fast movements and the air. Among them, there were middle-aged people, old people, men, and women. Without exception, their auras were extremely powerful. They were no weaker than the big old man, Simon. They finally realized that something was wrong. Like the big old man, Simon, they stopped practicing and rushed over. The moment they appeared, they were shocked and angry. Simon, who was no weaker than them, was lying on the ground, heavily injured. A foot was stepping on his head. Gray heard the angry shouts, but he didn't pay any attention to them. His feet didn't stop at all as he stomped down. Crack! The sound of a skull cracking was heard clearly. The big old man, Simon's head, was instantly flattened. Blood flowed out from his 7 orifices. His eyes were bulging, and there was still a look of horror on his face. Chapter 8:28. God damn it, he killed Simon. Kill him. Kill him so that he can accompany Simon in death. Seeing the death of the tall and sturdy old man Simon, some of the leaders who had a good relationship with the tall and sturdy old man Simon were so angry that their faces twisted. Killing intent burst out from their bodies, and the cold killing intent locked onto Gray. How dare you kill a major figure of our Earth St. Hall? How dare you? Even the big shots who didn't have a good relationship with Simon couldn't help but be enraged. Their conflict with the burly old man, Simon, was an internal conflict of the Earth Holy Hall. Behind closed doors, fighting to the death was an internal matter. However, Simon's death was the work of an external enemy. It was a provocation from the Earth St. Hall. As a member of the Earth St. Hall, it was their duty to protect the Earth St. Hall's glory and wipe out the enemy. Even if you have a great reason for daring to kill a major figure of our Earth St. Hall, you still have to. The various major figures were filled with killing intent. One of them was a man who was just as burly as Simon. He seemed to have become the center of attention for these major figures. He was the Hall Master of the Earth St. Hall, Jabo Fu. Just as he was about to give the order for all the major figures to work together to kill this invading enemy, an anxious voice suddenly rang out. Hall Master, you can't. He's an expert of laws. A middle-aged man said anxiously with a trembling voice. There was still some lingering fear on his face. The middle-aged woman and Simon could guess Gray's identity from Gray's actions. Naturally, there were people among the elders of the Earth St. Hall who could guess it as well. However, due to Simon's death, they were unable to react immediately. Seeing how the Hall Master and the major figures were about to surround and kill Gray, they immediately paled in fright and hurriedly stopped them. An expert of laws had perfect control over laws, turning them into a part of themselves. They were supreme experts who possessed a lifespan of several tens of thousands of years. The difference between the major figures and such existences was not something that could be made up for with numbers alone. If they really dared to surround and kill him, all the major figures would be killed, including the Hall Master. There would be no exceptions. What? He's an expert of laws? All the big shots, including the Hall Master, felt their killing intent suddenly freeze. Then, it quickly dissipated like a pile of sand sculptures collapsing. What followed was fear. Some people couldn't help but retreat. Even those who didn't retreat couldn't help but feel a chill in their hearts. The other party was actually a rule-level powerhouse. A rule-level powerhouse had actually charged into the sacred hall. This was an extremely dangerous situation. This was no longer something they could deal with. Only rule-level powerhouses could contend against rule-level powerhouses. Only the return of the saint would have the ability to contend against them. Rule-level powerhouse. Was the one fighting with us a rule-level powerhouse? How did the holy sanctum provoke a low-ranked powerhouse? The injured disciples and elders of the Earth St. Hall all felt their scalps turn numb. They were filled with lingering fear as chills ran down their spines. It was a miracle that they had not died after fighting a rule-level powerhouse. Of course, they could tell that it was not because they were lucky, but because the other party had no intention of killing them. As they were rather far away, the elders and disciples who had just rushed over were covered in cold sweat. Their legs trembled, and they did not even have the courage to retreat or flee. They were afraid that retreating or fleeing would attract the other party's attention and bring about a fatal disaster for themselves. He's a rule-level powerhouse? The black-haired young woman and brown-haired young woman's hearts were in turmoil. They were already very surprised that the other party had displayed strength that was even greater than that woman's, but they had never thought that there would be something even more surprising. The other party was actually a rule-level powerhouse. He was a powerful existence who possessed overwhelming might. There were only a few dozen of them in the entire origin world. Now that they thought about it, it was very likely that the woman on the runic ship was only his servant. It was exactly because she was a servant that she had taken the initiative to block the thundercloud bird's mixed ability. He did it for, the middle-aged man hurriedly came to the side of the Earth St. Hall's Hall Master, Jabo Fu, and quickly recounted the conversation between Gray and the burly old man, Simon. After a while, the Earth St. Hall's Hall Master, Jabo Fu, calmed down slightly and thought of what to say. "Sir, please calm down. The Earth St. Hall deeply apologizes for the fact that your subordinate was killed by an elder of my Earth St. Hall. However, the person who did it has already been killed by you. He has already received the punishment he deserved. Patriarch Simon was already dead, so the best way to deal with this was to push all the responsibility to him and clear the Earth St. Hall's name. It's not enough. It's far from enough. His life is not enough to make up for the loss of my servant's life." Gray shook his head coldly. "Sir, the Earth St. Hall is willing to compensate. We're willing to give you a grade 6 supplementary medicine as compensation." Jarbov, the temple master of the Earth Holy Temple, said hurriedly. "A grade 6 supplementary medicine as compensation? Are you sure you're not toying with me?" Gray's eyes suddenly shone with a cold light. A terrifying pressure pressed down on Jabo Fu like an avalanche. Jabo Fu immediately broke out in cold sweat. His heart felt like it was about to leap out of his chest. His body swayed, and he barely managed to hold on with his cultivation as a major figure. "Sir, what kind of compensation do you want?" The Earth St. Hall's Hall Master, Jabo Fu, was drenched in sweat as if he had just been fished out of water. "A set of rule-type magical herbs," Gray said calmly. "Sir, that item is too precious. The Earth St. Hall can't possibly afford it." The Earth St. Hall's Hall Master, Jabo Fu, smiled bitterly. "Are you still trying to play tricks? Do you really think I don't know why my servant was killed?" Gray's eyes were filled with warning. "This is your last chance to speak. If you continue to play tricks with me, you won't be able to speak ever again." The meaning of not speaking was self-evident. Sensing Gray's killing intent, the Earth St. Hall's Hall Master, Jabo Fu, no longer dared to hide anything and hurriedly said, "Sir, the Earth St. Hall has indeed obtained rule-type magical herbs, but they haven't matured yet." Gray knew the whole story from the Earth St. Hall's Hall Master, Jabo Fu. 3 years ago, an annihilation-grade expert from a top family who didn't have much time left went out to sea to seek opportunities. He returned a year later and brought back news of an island that grew rule-type magical herbs, the Earth Pulse fruit. He wanted to trade it with the Earth St. Hall in exchange for a level 6 life-prolonging magical herb. However, the Earth St. Hall didn't want the news to leak. After obtaining the news, they chose the safest method, exterminating the family and preventing the news from leaking. It wasn't as if the family wasn't prepared. They had long hidden a group of their disciples, and when the family was in trouble, they chose to fight to the death and spread the news. After learning that the news had been leaked, the Earth St. Hall hurriedly sealed the news and killed everyone who knew about it. The rule-class experts of the Earth St. Hall even personally rushed to the island in the endless ocean to guard it. The news that Shadow 11 had obtained was this kind of news that had spread outside. However, it wasn't complete. It was precisely because he had sought out this kind of news that the Earth St. Hall had noticed him and brought about a fatal disaster. "You really reap what you sow," After hearing the Earth Saint Hall leader Jabo Fu's explanation, Gray revealed a mocking smile. In order to prevent the news from leaking, the Earth Saint Hall had chosen the most ruthless method. They were prepared to completely wipe out the top faction that knew about the news. However, this top faction was prepared and had long since hidden a group of their disciples. After learning that their family had been exterminated, these people had immediately spread the news. The Earth Saint Hall had clearly wanted to seal the news, but instead it had caused the news to leak. It could be said that they had reaped what they had sown. Give me the map of the island where the Earth Pulse fruit is. Gray didn't care about what the Earth Saint Hall had done, nor did he have any thoughts of standing up for the top family. Sir, to prevent the news from leaking, all the maps have been destroyed. The only map left is in the wisdom rune of the rune ship. The Earth Saint Hall leader Jabo Fu explained. Very well, then use that rune ship to bring me there. You come along too. Gray pondered for a moment and said, Sir, as the Earth Saint Hall's leader, I have many things to take care of. I really can't leave. Hearing Gray's request, the Earth Saint Hall leader Jabo Fu's heart skipped a beat. However, he was interrupted by Gray halfway through. I didn't discuss this with you. A day later, a rune ship set off from the Earth Saint Hall. It traversed more than half of the Earth Saint Hall's territory and entered the endless ocean. Not long after the rune ship left the Earth Saint Hall, a piece of news of the highest level was sent out by the Earth Saint Hall. In the end, it reached an island in the endless ocean. When the elder in charge of intelligence on the island received the news, he didn't dare to delay. He quickly passed the news to a tall, bald, middle-aged man. He was the current saint of the Earth Saint Hall, Walter. Humph, how dare you barge into my Earth Saint Hall? How bold of you to even have designs on the Earth Pulse fruit. Aren't you afraid that you'll die from overeating? The endless ocean will be your burial ground. Although my strength should be enough to be on the safe side, I have to contact an old friend. The price of one Earth Pulse fruit won't be small. I lost an Earth Pulse fruit in vain. This account, I will remember it. When the time comes, I will make you beg for death. The latest chapter of The Blood Warrior is coming from the website. Chapter 829. 10 days later, the runic ship of the Earth Temple entered the Endless Sea region and went quite deep. With a law powerhouse like Gray exuding his law aura as a deterrent, the blood fiends below the law realm naturally did not dare to attack the runic ship. Furthermore, the law blood fiends in the outer regions were not that easy to encounter. The runic ship was unimpeded as it traversed through the endless sea where the blood fiends were rampant. If not for the fact that they could clearly see powerful blood fiends retreating far away, they would have thought that the endless sea region was an exaggeration. Of course, the endless sea region was not only dangerous with all kinds of powerful blood fiends, but also with all kinds of natural disasters. There was a huge whirlpool of seawater with a powerful suction force that sucked everything into it. Gray once saw a disaster-level bird beast flying through the air and being sucked into the whirlpool, never to be able to escape. There was a huge wave that was hundreds or even thousands of meters tall. It was like a towering mountain and was extremely spectacular. It carried a powerful force as it crashed forward. Occasionally, there would be various birds and beasts that could not dodge in time being swallowed by the huge wave. Even islands were no exception. There was also a huge typhoon in the sea. The seawater was swept up into the sky and the blood fiends were sucked into it, turning into a red blood mist. Even the runic ship was sucked in. In the end, it was Gray who took action. With his powerful battle strength at the level of laws, he forcefully dispersed the typhoon and prevented the runic ship from being sucked into it. On this day, the wind was gentle and the sun was bright. It was rare for the endless sea to be calm. The huge surface of the sea was like a huge mirror that was extremely flat. In the runic ship, Gray was comprehending the laws. The third law he chose to comprehend was the law of puppet. The law of puppets was a law formed from the fusion of the specter, super memory, puppets, and self-healing abilities. It was a law that had helped Gray's growth countless contributions. It had helped Gray much more than the other 3 laws. However, after his battle strength reached the level of laws, Gray rarely used this ability in battle. He used it more as a support method. This was because puppets at the level of laws were very difficult to obtain. As for puppets below the level of laws, they could no longer be part of his battle strength. This time, he entered the Endless Sea region to check on the situation of the Earth Vein fruit. On the other hand, Gray planned to hunt a few powerful blood fiends of laws to increase the battle strength of the law of puppet. Boom! Suddenly, a burly middle-aged man emerged from the sea near the runic ship. He was the saint of the earth, Saint Hall, Walter. As soon as he appeared, he threw a punch at the rune ship, and a terrifying shockwave that could be seen with the naked eye swept towards the rune ship. It was very similar to the vibrational waves that the burly old man, Simon, had blasted out using the law of tremor. However, the vibrational waves were much stronger and the color was completely different. Simon's attack could only cause space to tremble like a piece of cloth, but Walter's attack completely tore space to shreds, causing many cracks to appear. The color of the shock wave changed from translucent to pure black, and one could feel an extremely gloomy aura coming from it. This was not the end. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. In another direction, another person appeared. It was a man wearing silver chainmail. As soon as the other party appeared, numerous silver chains pierced out from the void. They were as straight as javelins, piercing towards the formation ship from several directions. Fine spatial cracks began to appear in the void under the effects of the straight silver chains. Woo! 2 terrifying attacks, with the power to destroy the heavens and the earth, swept towards the runic ship from 2 different directions. The air violently shook, and in an instant, the originally calm sea was suddenly filled with raging winds. The seawater surged, and killing intent filled the air. The formation ship was like a lone boat in the middle of a storm, about to be destroyed in the next moment. However, in the next moment, spatial ripples spread out. As the spatial ripples spread out, the terrifying vibrations with the gloomy aura suddenly disappeared. Afterwards, they changed directions and collided with the Saint of the Earth, Saint Hall, who had unleashed the vibrations. The large number of silver chains also suddenly disappeared. When they reappeared, they had changed directions as well, attacking the man in silver chainmail who was controlling the silver chains. Swish! Within the formation ship, Gray, who had been comprehending the laws, suddenly opened his eyes. There seemed to be 2 rays of sharp light shooting out from his eyes, piercing through the formation ship and looking outside. They're finally here. However, they're really ruthless. They even gave up on a hall master without any hesitation. Gray had naturally thought of the possibility of being ambushed by the law experts of a Saint-grade faction to snatch the Earth Pulse fruit from them. In order to avoid being ambushed, he had asked the Earth Saint Hall's hall master, Jabo, to accompany him. However, he had still underestimated the ruthlessness of the Earth Saint Hall. They could even give up on a hall master just like that, not caring about his life at all. Swish! With a step, Gray appeared outside the formation ship and saw the 2 people who had attacked him. One was a burly middle-aged man, while the other was a man in chainmail. The 2 of them were currently locked onto by his attacks. However, as the users of abilities, the 2 of them were extremely proficient in dealing with his attacks. The burly middle-aged man punched out, and the same vibrations spread out before overlapping with the incoming vibrations. In an instant, the 2 vibrations completely disappeared. Even his clothes were not ruffled. The man in chainmail stood where he was without moving at all. The silver chains that extended towards him suddenly stopped when they were about to reach him. 2 law experts. Looks like they've put in quite a bit of effort to kill me. A cold smile appeared on Gray's face. It was naturally impossible for the Earth Saint Hall to have 2 law experts. One of them had to be a helper they had invited. How could it be so easy to invite a law expert? The Earth Saint Hall's expert of laws had definitely paid a huge price to invite this law expert. It might even have been the price of an earth pulse fruit that had yet to ripen. He really is young. After the sneak attack was blocked, the saint from the Temple of the Earth Saints, Walter, and the man in chainmail did not immediately attack. Instead, they sized up Gray. They could sense that Gray was young. It was not just his appearance that was young. His body was extremely young as well. His aura was filled with vitality. This kind of vitality could only be felt from young people. He should not be over 100 years old. He might not even be 50. It's a little troublesome. He actually grasps the law of space. He seems to be able to divert attacks. The burly middle-aged man frowned as he sensed the spatial ripples around the formation ship. It is indeed a little troublesome. However, I'm the best at dealing with strange abilities like this. Leave it to me. The man in chainmail said confidently. Afterwards, silver chains appeared in the air one after another, piercing straight towards Gray. However, they were immediately transported away after entering the spatial maze. However, the man in chainmail was already prepared. The silver chains changed directions and pierced into the spatial maze once more. Very soon, the spatial maze was filled with crisscrossing silver chains. Suddenly, the silver chains all began to glow with silver light. Afterwards, all the teleportation points collapsed at the same time. Afterwards, a large number of silver chains attacked Gray from all directions, as if they had been waiting for this moment. They sealed off all of Gray's escape routes. In an instant, Gray was surrounded. Suddenly, far too suddenly, all the teleportation points were destroyed in an instant. The spatial maze that acted as a natural protection vanished in an instant. Swish, 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 swish. Gray was completely covered by the silver chains. The silver chains pierced through Gray's location and intertwined with each other, forming a silver metal sphere with a diameter of 10 meters. He's dead? Seeing that Gray was unable to escape in time and was completely enveloped by the silver chains, Walter was delighted. However, the man in chainmail shook his head slightly. We let him escape. He should be able to teleport. The silver chains were the hands and feet of the man in chainmail. He could sense whether or not he had hit his target the moment his attack landed. He was extremely sure that Lin Huang was not in the silver metal sphere. Lin Huang had definitely escaped. The two of them looked around and very soon discovered Gray's figure several kilometers away. He had a head of black hair and was completely unharmed. Even his clothes were undamaged. What's going on? The silver chains shouldn't be able to destroy the teleportation points with their power. Looking at the silver metal sphere that had almost trapped him, Gray frowned slightly. If he had been surrounded by a veteran expert of the realm of laws who did not know how to teleport, he would most likely have been pierced to death by the densely packed silver chains. Fortunately, he had teleportation. Even if the other party's attack had completely sealed off all the space he could dodge, he could still ignore this seal and escape with teleportation. However, the other party's method of destroying the spatial maze had greatly shocked him. It was as if it was an ability specially created to counter the spatial maze. Gray increasingly understood the characteristic of the abilities of the realm of laws. They countered each other. There was no ability that could dominate the world with a single move. There would always be an ability that countered it. Although the spatial maze could even divert attacks and allow one to be in a safe zone, there were also abilities that countered it. For example, Saint Koro's Phantom Space and the ability the man in chainmail had just used. The instant the silver chains released the silver light, all the teleportation points seemed to have been affected by some kind of interference. They all disintegrated from their root. Could it be boom? Gray did not have the chance to think carefully. The Earth Temple's St. Walter had already arrived and punched at Gray. A pitch-black vibration wave that emitted a sinister aura attacked Gray along with numerous spatial cracks. This was a hybrid law ability formed from the fusion of the law of tremor and the law of darkness. The fusion of the two law abilities that were already extremely destructive gave this hybrid law ability extremely powerful destructive power. Chapter 830. In front of Gray, a small black ball appeared and collided with the destructive shockwave. Puff! The shockwave seemed to have been penetrated and dissipated as the small black ball slammed into the burly middle-aged man. At the point of collision, a huge spatial hole appeared. There was no wild wind because before the wind could wreak havoc, it had been sucked in by the spatial hole. In the collision between the two, the small black ball's power was clearly superior. As a matter that did not belong to this world formed by the fusion of time law and space law, the small black ball was special and had extremely destructive power. Very few law abilities of the same level could compare to it. The reason why it had not been shown before was that in every battle, Gray had always fought with someone of a higher realm with a lower realm. But this time, it was a battle of the same realm. Bang! The burly middle-aged man punched out, sending the greatly weakened small black ball flying. Gray did not have time to follow up with another attack because on the other side, the man in chainmail's attack had already arrived. Whoosh! 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 In the void to Gray's left, silver chains shot out like javelins, piercing straight at Gray. Gray's heart stirred and a spatial barrier appeared in that direction, blocking the silver chains. As a law powerhouse, the man in chainmail could naturally see the spatial barrier. Seeing the spatial barrier, a strange smile appeared on his face. The next moment, the silver chains hit the spatial barrier and released silver light. Following that, the originally extremely sturdy spatial barrier actually couldn't hold on for even a moment before collapsing. It was as fragile as a bubble, and the silver chain pierced straight towards Gray without any hindrance. Whoosh! In the nick of time, Gray teleported and appeared several miles away. Looking at the silver chains that had completely pierced through him, his eyes revealed a look of realization. It really is the magic seal law. After 2 collisions, he finally confirmed his guess. This law ability was the magic seal law. The magic seal law was a very unique and special law. It had the characteristic of magic seal. Any ability that came into contact with the body of the law would lose its effectiveness. An ability that could nullify one's abilities was definitely an unsolvable ability. The only drawback was that this ability required physical contact in order to gain the ability to nullify magic. However, the ability of the man in mail armor was obviously different. He didn't need physical contact, so Gray wasn't sure before. However, just now, even the spatial barrier with absolute defense had been easily penetrated. He was finally sure that what the other party possessed was indeed the magic seal law. The reason why there was no need for physical contact should be due to the fusion of the magic seal law and the chain law. The magic seal characteristic had been extended, and the silver chain also had the magic seal characteristic. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The silver chain once again attacked Gray. In front of Gray, the small pitch-black ball that had already returned shot out rapidly. Ding, ding, ding. The pitch-black ball continuously changed directions, knocking away the silver chains one after another. But in the next moment, the silver chains all emitted a silver-white light, wrapping around the pitch-black ball from all directions. The pitch-black ball could no longer display the same destructive power as before. It was as if it had sunk into a quagmire, becoming slower and slower. In the end, it was wrapped by the silver chains, crushed and shattered. Meanwhile, the silver chains changed directions, attacking Gray from all directions like silver snake. At the same time, Saint Walter of the Earth Temple arrived. With a punch, terrifying pitch-black shockwaves spread across half the sky, attacking Gray from behind. Swish! Teleporting to avoid the encirclement, Gray looked at the two of them with a cautious expression. If I hadn't comprehended laws, I would probably have to teleport away again like last time when facing the two of them working together. Saint Walter of the Earth Temple was not weak. In terms of battle prowess, he was only slightly weaker than Saint Rudolph of the Basilica of the Holy Blood. As for the chainmail man, due to his special ability, he was even stronger than Saint Walter of the Earth Temple. The magic seal law could render the opponent's abilities ineffective, while the chain law could bestow offensive and binding abilities. Coupled with the chain law's sturdy characteristic, that made it difficult to break through, the other party's battle prowess could be said to be unrivaled among veteran experts of laws. This was probably why Saint Walter of the Earth Temple had asked him to help ambush him. But he was rather curious. Was Saint Walter of the Earth Temple not afraid of a backlash and taking all the earth vein fruits for himself? Swish, 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 swish. The silver chains once again attacked like snakes, and a cold light appeared in Gray's eyes. Do you really think I can't do anything to the magic seal law? Strengthen it. The law of curse was activated, and a blood-red light enveloped Gray. His basic abilities as a veteran expert of laws were immediately boosted. Sun Sword. With the appearance of the Sun Sword, Gray's abilities of laws were boosted once more. At this moment, his battle prowess was twice as strong as before. An unprecedented feeling of power filled his body and mind. The pitch-black ball appeared. No, it could no longer be called a pitch-black ball, as it had grown to the size of a soccer ball. Not only that, but the method of controlling it had also undergone a qualitative change, becoming even more varied. Swish. A moment later, the pitch-black ball transformed into a sword, a pitch-black sword. Clang. A sharp aura was revealed, as if it was a true divine weapon. Under this sharpness, cracks appeared in space. The pitch-black sword pierced through space, turning into a black streak of light as it stabbed at the chain-armored man. Danger. The chain-armored man clearly sensed the danger. Ignoring Gray, all his silver chains erupted with silver light as they met the pitch-black sword. Ding, 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 ding. Under the impact of the silver chains, the pitch-black sword did not seem to sink into a quagmire like the pitch-black ball. Instead, one silver chain after another was shattered, as if the magic seal law had disappeared. Very soon, all the silver chains shattered, and there was no longer any obstruction between the pitch-black sword and the chain-armored man. Not good. The saint from the Earth Temple, Walter, who was about to circle around and attack Gray, cried out in surprise. From the other side, a fist containing the laws of darkness and curse punched out. Pitch-black ripples spread across half the sky, blocking the path of the pitch-black sword. Pooh! It was still unable to block it. The pitch-black shockwaves were penetrated by the pitch-black sword, and the pitch-black sword went straight for the chain-armored man. The chain-armored man's heart thumped wildly. He quickly moved to the side, narrowly avoiding the pitch-black sword's thrust. However, before he could heave a sigh of relief, Walter's anxious voice rang out. Careful! Pooh! A black light flashed, and his right hand was severed at the wrist. Blood spurted out like a sprinkler, but it was not water but blood. Only now did the power of the pitch-black sword completely dissipate, and it was pulled back to Gray by an invisible force. Why did the magic seal law lose its effect? Walter quickly moved to the side, shielding the injured chain-armored man behind him, as he asked in bewilderment. No, the magic seal law didn't lose its effect. It's just that his battle prowess suddenly increased greatly, and it's already exceeded the limits of what can be removed. The chain-armored man covered his severed arm with cold sweat as he spoke gravely. The laws of magic seal had not disappeared. He was very sure of this. Only his laws of magic seal could make other abilities disappear, and no other ability could make his laws of magic seal disappear. However, the power of the pitch-black sword was just too great. It had surpassed the magic seal by a large margin. While the magic seal was still effective to a certain extent, it was unable to completely erase the power of the pitch-black sword. Just how did your Earth Holy Hall provoke such a monster? He looked at Saint Walter of the Earth Temple with some resentment. He had agreed to work together to deal with Gray partly because of the temptation of the earth vein fruit, and partly because Walter had once saved his life. However, Now that the Earth Holy Hall had provoked such a terrifying monster and caused him to be in such danger, he had already repaid his debt. If he could survive this time, he would definitely distance himself from Walter. However, the prerequisite was that he could survive. Absolute power can indeed break the laws. Looking at the pitch-black sword that had returned to his side, Gray nodded in satisfaction. Laws were mysterious and powerful, and had the ability to restrain each other. If one's own laws could restrain the opponent's laws, then victory was basically assured. However, absolute power could also break the laws and break the restraints of the laws. The battle with Basilica of the Holy Blood had made him realize that great power could break the laws. Originally, with Basilica of the Holy Blood's laws, Rudolph should have been restrained by his spatial maze. However, Rudolph had broken the spatial maze with his absolute power. Clang! The pitch-black sword once again emitted a sharp aura that could even shatter space as it prepared to attack again. Sir, we admit defeat. The Earth Vein Fruit is yours. All of the Earth Vein Fruits are yours. Faced with Gray, whose strength had increased explosively, the Saint of the Earth Holy Temple, Walter, knew that he had no chance of winning. The Earth Vein Fruit is naturally mine. Not just the Earth Vein Fruit, but your lives are also mine. Gray revealed a cold smile. If they had not ambushed him, he would have at most snatched the Earth Vein Fruit that had been exchanged with Shadow 11's life. He would not have done anything to them. However, since the other party had already ambushed him, he naturally would not let the other party go. After staying in this space-time for more than 5 years, he already understood that the necessary killing would instead be like cutting the Gordian knot, reducing the influence of this space-time. If he let them off today, they might find more helpers and trigger another series of battles. This would have an even greater influence on this space-time. Chapter 831. Run! Sensing Gray's killing intent and knowing that Gray would not let them go, the Basilica of the Holy Blood Saint Rudolph and the man in chainmail made a prompt decision. They turned into 2 streams of light and fled in 2 different directions at several times the speed of sound. They did not flee in the same direction because only by fleeing in different directions would they have a chance of survival. Of course, the first person to be chased by the other party had almost no chance of survival. Whoosh! Gray coldly looked at the 2 fleeing men. The next moment, with a teleportation, he appeared several li away and stopped the man in chainmail. Seeing Gray blocking his way, the man in chainmail paled. He knew that he had been chosen as the first person to be chased. His chances of survival had become very slim. You monster, die! Under the fear, under the threat of life and death, his face became extremely ferocious, and his eyes glared at Gray with rage. Whoosh! 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 In front of Gray, the pitch-black sword once again transformed into a pitch-black ball. Then, it split into numerous small pitch-black balls that shot out explosively. Clink! 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 As for the caster of the ability, a bloody hole as thick as a bowl appeared on the chest of the man in the mail armor. While defending, the black ball still had the power to attack. It delivered a fatal blow to the man in chainmail who couldn't dodge in time with the silver chain. With reluctance in his eyes, the man in chainmail could no longer maintain his posture in the air. His body fell into the sea. Gray appeared with a teleport and sent him into his plane. He looked in another direction, where the Earth Holy Hall St. Walter was fleeing at full speed. No. Chase after me. The Saint of the Earth Holy Temple, Walter, heard the sounds of battle on the other side. He immediately understood that the other party had chosen the man in chainmail as their first target. Knowing that he was not the first target to be hunted down and that his chances of survival had increased, he felt an inexplicable joy in his heart. Although they had been friends for many years, if there was a chance that only one of them could survive, he would choose himself without hesitation. Human nature was selfish. Even becoming an expert of laws could not change this. Or rather, it could be said that experts of laws cherish their lives even more. With a lifespan of several tens of thousands of years, he still had plenty of time to waste. If he died just like that, he would be even more unwilling than ordinary people. Bang! Suddenly, his eyes widened as he flew forward. His face was filled with shock as he reflexively took a step forward with his right foot. Under his stomp, a violent gust of wind appeared in front of him, and even cracks appeared in space. Under this powerful reaction force, he, who was rapidly flying forward, came to a stop. The reason why he had stopped was because a figure had appeared in front of him. It was a figure that clearly had delicate features, but he seemed like a demon to him. How are you so fast? His burly body was tense, and the lines of his muscles became even more distinct. He could erupt with power greater than blood beasts of laws at any time, but this did not give Walter any sense of security. He stared in horror at Gray, who was blocking his way. His forehead was covered in cold sweat. How long do you think he can block me for? Gray looked at the Earth Temple's Saint Walter with a mocking gaze. You monster! Under extreme fear, the saint from the Temple of the Earth Saints let out a roar, emboldening himself. He advanced instead of retreating, throwing a punch at Gray with all his might. Boom! Visible black shockwaves caused spatial cracks to appear. They were like the main cannons of a battleship, deafening and overwhelming as they blasted towards Gray. Clang! The pitch-black ball turned back into a pitch-black sword. Just the sound of it caused spatial cracks to appear as it slashed towards the black shockwave. Pooh! The black shockwaves were sliced apart. It was not just the shockwaves that were sliced apart. Walter's body was also sliced apart. From the waist, his body was sliced apart neatly. There were no bumps at the edges, and even his silver bones were no exception. It was as if what had been sliced apart was not the flesh and bones of an expert of laws, but human-shaped butter. Poochie! Blood splattered from the two halves of his body, and the furious expression on Walter's face froze. His body fell towards the sea powerlessly. However, before he fell, Gray swept him into the plain. How can this be? Saint Luofu is dead, and Sir Walter is also dead? Several dozen kilometers away, the only survivor apart from Gray was the head of the Earth Temple. He was completely stunned. Taking advantage of the battle, he escaped from the runic ship and hid far away, avoiding the shockwaves from the battle between experts of laws. However, the people on the runic ship were not so lucky. Under the shockwaves of the laws, they shattered along with the ship. He was furious and resentful that the Saint of the Earth Saints, Walter, had disregarded his life and had attacked him as well. However, no matter how furious he was still on the side of the Earth Temple. Seeing his saint find another saint to ambush Gray, he was delighted. He felt that even if he could not kill Gray, he would definitely be able to force Gray back and protect the Earth Vein Fruit. However, what he saw next made him almost unable to believe his eyes. Saint Walter and Saint Luofu, who had come to help, were not Gray's match and had chosen to flee. The joint forces of two saints were actually not a match for Gray and had chosen to flee. This was already shocking to him, but he was even more shocked to the point of disbelief. Not a single one of the two saints had been able to escape successfully, and both of them had been killed by Gray. It's over. The Earth Temple is finished, and so is the Silver Temple. He did not dare to imagine how great of a commotion it would cause in the origin world if news of the two saints' deaths were to spread. However, what was certain was that the Earth Temple and Saint Luofu's Silver Temple would definitely experience a great upheaval. If they were not careful, they might even be destroyed. Swish! Gray appeared next to the sole survivor and pierced the pitch-black sword next to him. Now that the two saints had been killed, in order to minimize the impact on this space-time, Gray had to use the puppet ability to revive the two of them. The puppet ability naturally could not be exposed, so he could not allow anyone who knew of their deaths to live. The only survivor, the Earth Temple's Hall Master, naturally could not be allowed to live. Faced with the incoming pitch-black sword, the Earth Temple's Hall Master did not dodge. His expression was blank as he allowed the pitch-black sword to pierce through his heart. He had already completely lost his will to live. This was because he knew that there was no way he could escape. Even the two saints were no exception, let alone him. Over 2 hours later, the powerhouse and the two saints had been revived by the puppet ability. Even Hu Li's severed arm and the Earth Temple's Saint Walter's severed body had been reconnected. If they had completely shattered and disappeared, it would definitely be impossible to repair them even with the self-healing ability. However, if they were only severed, they could be repaired. After being revived, the three of them stood respectfully before Gray, as if they were soldiers waiting for Gray's inspection. Looking at the three of them, Gray nodded in satisfaction. With the people he had brought over, it was truly not enough for him to search for law-type magic herbs. He had long since wanted to expand and get more helpers. Now that the two temples were in his hands, he could take advantage of this opportunity to gain control of these two saint organizations. With their intelligence network, they could help him search for precious law-type magic herbs. Bring me to the island where the Earth Pulse fruit is. Gray looked at the Earth Holy Temple's Saint Walter. Yes. Saint Walter of the Earth Temple responded and hurriedly led the way, leading Gray to the island where the Earth Pulse fruit was.